This is year 6 of Locked On Senators, and it is season 5 of our organizational value rankings. Look, I'm actually going to do this, Pillsy. We haven't even spoken about this, but I'm going to do it for the people. We're going to make a new Google Doc, and as we do the countdown, I will be pasting those names into the list, and that way we'll put that in the comments in case you want an easy, clickable list to find all of our rankings, and you can see what the year-over-year progression is. We've got, of course, our player cards coming up as well. But Pilsy, the big question, how do we rate value?
That's a fair question, Ross. So we've done this. It's organizational value rankings. So the key thing is, or at least how I think about it, Ross, is how valuable are these players to this organization, first and foremost, but then not just how the Sens view them, but how valuable are they in a league sense as well? Kind of like, you're playing Chell on PS5 and they've got the little trade bar of amount of value, that kind of thing. So we're looking at age, contract, skill, health.
Draft position a little bit for the new guys.
Yep, draft position, where they're playing, things like that. Even position, left hand D over right hand D kind of thing. So basically, it's your total value that each player has. And we've tried to, rather than just do one long consecutive list, we've tried to break it up into tiers to group guys together. And then that way, if you have an issue of where guys are ranked 1 or 2 spots, it's not that big of a deal. It's more about where they're tiered.
But if it is a big deal that we misranked your favorite player, sound off in the comments. Let us know. We have 10 tiers this year. Tier 1 is our franchise tier. No spoilers, but it's 3 players long. We've got an elite tier below it, followed by a very good young talent tier, NHLers, promising young talent, fringe NHLers, prospects, AHL depth, more prospects, and the final tier, unknown, where guys just haven't made their mark. We're just really going off their draft position unless they haven't done a whole lot since then. And that's the tier we're going to start at coming in. And by the way, last Monday, we did a complete roster recap and we discussed all the players that left this list, the dearly departed. Last year, the list was 60 long. This year, it's 63. However, we do have 2 additional ones. We'll call them 64 and 65. Kalen Addison and Nikolai Kulemin not officially on the list. They will be at Senators training camp on professional tryouts. Well, what do you say, Pilsy? Starting off our organizational value rankings, 7th round pick, Nicholas Van Tassel.
Yes, Nicholas Van Tassel, Ross. I believe I have Googled Nicholas Van Tassel more times than anyone else on the planet. When you look the guys up and it comes in purple in your search bar, there's like 5 of them for Nicholas Van Tassel. So,
and right under it, it says you visited this page often.
Yeah, which is great. I'm really caught up on my Nicholas Van Tassel news. He's 20 years old, centerman, 6'4", 201 pounds, shoots right, and he played at UMass last year, 24 games, only 1 goal, only 1 assist for 2 points. He is a 2023 7th round pick, 215th overall, and he will be playing at University of Massachusetts next season. That's kind of all I've got on Nicholas Van Tassel here.
Well, last year, he was 215th overall in the 2023 draft, and Ottawa didn't have a pick beyond the 5th round in this year's draft. So it was one of those where it's like, okay, we're just going to kind of go with what we did last year, where Van Tassel was the lowest pick and had just been drafted. So he was last on the list last year. This is not an indictment on his play. He's got that potential since he is such a large frame and still young, still growing. But you just like to see a little bit more production at the college level. So that's what we're going to be looking for this year from Nicholas Van Tassel. Won't be at NHL camp since he's in college, so we wish him the best of luck at the University of Massachusetts. I think you're going to notice at the start of this list, we're just going to kind of run through it. There's not a whole lot to dive into, and as we get nearer and nearer to the top, we'll start to get into some discussion about what our expectations are this year. But last year, I'd say maybe slightly below expectation for Van Tassel. You'd like to see more than 2 points in 24 games, but we also don't know the scope of how limited his role may have been or anything like that with the University of Massachusetts. Did I pronounce that right? My mom told me the other day I don't pronounce Massachusetts right.
I think everyone says it different. I say Massachusetts.
UMass. Nicholas Van Tassel comes in at number 63 on our organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 62, it's another college player from the University of Wisconsin, Tyson Dyck. Pilsy, what can you tell us about him?
Tyson Dyck, University of Wisconsin, although he was at UMass the year before, this year at University of Wisconsin, played all 28 games, no goals, unfortunately, but he did have 9 assists, matching his point total from the previous year. He was drafted in the 7th round of the 2022 draft, 206th overall. Good Abbotsford, BC kid, 20 years old, 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, left shot centerman. And I'm not sure. I assume he's going to be back at University of Wisconsin. Usually EP has their next year already loaded up there, but I don't see that. So I guess unknown where Tyson Dyck will be playing next year.
As we discussed with David St. Louis last week, though, it might be a good thought to get the players out of there just for now. The program hasn't necessarily been too solid. But again, do you want to be at 3 schools in 3 years? That's something that Tyson Dyck is going to have to wait. Or away, I should say. Last year, as a freshman, he had 5 goals and 9 points. This year, no goals and 9 points. -4 in his first year, +13 last year on a University of Wisconsin team that didn't have a whole lot of guys in the pluses. Tyson Dyck was the 5th highest on that team over in Wisconsin. I'm expecting more of the same probably next year. 20 years old, though.
Let's get a goal next year, though.
Let's get a goal.
Yep.
Tyson Dyck comes in at number 62 on our Locked On Senators organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 61, it's Owen Beckner, who, I mean, out of the players we've done so far, he's a player at least that we talked to Angus Crookshank. We talked to some guys at development camp, and they're like, hey, Owen Beckner stood out. So Owen Beckner comes in at number 61.
Yeah, and certainly the point totals for Owen here jump out a little more than the other guys. In 61 games in the USHL with the Tri-City Storm, 14 goals, 31 assists, good for 45 points. Needs a little work in the -15, but that's okay. He also had 4 points in the playoffs, Ross, and he's done with the USHL. He's going to be going to Colorado College next season, and this is another 7th round pick, so you're probably getting the hang of the bottom players we have, 7th rounders in 2023. Unknowns. Yeah, unknown. We're still taking a look at these guys. 204th overall, 6'2", 181 center, left shot. Owen Beckner. I think he's going to have a smooth transition to college, Ross, because he did come from the BCHL the season before and was able to jump into the USHL. So I think that's a good pathway. BCHL, USHL, NCAA. I think that's a nice progression.
Owen Beckner is one of 9 NHL prospects on Colorado College, so it should be a decent team out there in the NCHC. They play against North Dakota, among other teams in that conference. So Owen Beckner comes in at number 61, and Pilsy, I think it's worth mentioning as well the fact that the Ottawa Senators have kind of gone this route quite a bit in the later rounds, where they're going with these USHL kids and guys who maybe won't be making an impact anytime soon, but you're excited to see when that day comes. It's also of note that we don't have any like at 1 year we did this. Nikita Zaitsev was the last ranked player, right? Because the contract was so bad, that sort of thing. So it is worth noting that no longer are we going with bad contracts at the end. I don't think Ottawa has any that would warrant being at the very bottom, like maybe they did one day. Well, a lot of people can take stock into what our countdown is here at the organizational value rankings. Let's jump right back into it. It's our first LOSP guest, Cameron O'Neill, comes in at number 60. He put up comedic numbers at Mount St. Charles High School back in the day, but the production hasn't necessarily made its way to the college game yet.
You're suggesting he's had a bit of a drop-off since his 133-point season?
Yes.
Fair. That's fair. Another UMass guy, Ross. We're talking a lot about UMass here. 28 games, 3 goals, 4 assists for 7 points. He is a right winger, 6 feet, 198 pounds, shoots right. He was a 5th round draft pick in the 2022 draft, 143rd overall, 20 years old, American from Maryland. That's it on Cameron O'Neill for me.
Yeah, pretty much like one of those guys where he had so much skill as a younger player. Now it's just about rounding out his game. He was 57th on our list right after being selected in the 5th round, then 53rd last year, and now number 60 on our rankings. All these players so far are unsigned. Coming in at number 59, Eerik Wallenius. I think many people are seeing him for the first time in the photo on this graphic. He is this year's mythical creature, where it feels like Ottawa drafts a player that nobody's heard of every year. Remember Leevi Merilainen? It was one of those where everyone just shrugged and said, yeah, I don't know who he is. Well, Eerik Wallenius is 6'4", 212 pounds. He had 3 goals, 14 points in 37 games last year, playing for HPK in Finland. And guess what? He's already started his season this year and has almost matched his goal output from last year, and he's doing it against U20 competition now. He's got 2 goals and an assist in 3 games and 18 penalty minutes. So, shocker, the Sens get a big physical defenseman in this draft.
Yeah, 6'4", 212 pounds, left shot defenseman, and I actually think this isn't one of those, look at the size, left shot defenseman, point and laugh at the Sens drafting type.
Hey, point up.
Yeah, point up. You better be pointing up and looking up when you're talking about Eerik Wallenius. I actually think there's a bit of potential here, Ross. I like this pick. He's only played 2 Liga games. He got 1 Liga game to start where he had 5 minutes, 16 seconds, but he did get a Liga game at the end of last season as well, and a hot start to the U20 League, Ross. I'm feeling good about Eerik Wallenius here.
Well, we know you're known on this show for doing your Finnish scouting trip, so you got another one here.
Yeah, well, I'll go check out HPK on my next trip.
So we'll be following Eerik Wallenius throughout this season. Probably the most interesting of the unknowns, which is why he's at the top of this tier. This tier runs from 59 down to 63. Just the players that were 5th round picks or later, and guys who are still trying to establish themselves as legit NHL prospects. But the next tier is basically just guys who we know a little bit more about, but it's a bit of a blurred line between these 2 tiers. Coming in at number 58 on our organizational value rankings, just acquired this summer in the trade for Roby Järventie, along with Xavier Borgo, is Jake Chiasson. He played most of the season last year in Fort Wayne in the ECHL, 68 games, 20 points, dash 12 there. He's got 2 years left on his contract, though, Pilsy, at 843. So you think he's probably going to be a Swiss Army knife AHL guy this season?
Yeah, most likely, Ross. And we're starting to see the importing of Steve Staios guys, right? Every GM, you tend to see that they have their guys. And I think Jake Chiasson and another player we're going to talk about much later on in our rankings were brought over because Steve Staios was familiar with them in the Edmonton organization where he spent some time. He was a 4th round pick in 2021, 6'2", 187 pounds, another Abbotsford kid, 21 years old. Last year, spent almost all of his season. He played 1 game in the AHL with Bakersfield, but he played 68 games in the ECHL with the Fort Wayne Comets, 9 goals, 11 assists. So at least he's putting up some production in the ECHL, but I got a hard time, Ross, thinking that Chiasson's going to crack this Belleville Senators roster.
Now, David Bell saying that he's had conversations with Chiasson. He says he's comfortable playing center, playing wing. So at least he can be that type of utility guy. And he's got the size and he's got the determination. I've read a lot of articles talking about the character that he brings as well. Tim Baines did a great article feature on him in the Ottawa Sun. So you can go check that out. But yeah, Jake Chiasson makes his debut on the organizational value rankings at number 58, providing a little bit of depth and also taking a contract off of the Oilers' hands in a 2-for-1 trade that opened some other doors for them. Coming in at number 57, it's Oliver Johansson. Do you remember, because I do clear as day, after the 2021 draft, the much malaligned 2021 draft for the Ottawa Senators, where they went very heavy and very large for the first time. And after, Trent Mann was almost giddy to talk about this one player didn't fit that description. And we're going to tell you about this skillful little guy, under 6'1", that we got. He's now 6 feet, 183 pounds. Oliver Johansson playing in the SHL. It's screaming Jonathan Dahlen 2.0, where the skill is there, but you're like, why are you not putting it together year over year? He went from right after being drafted 52nd on a ranking all the way up to 40, then 43, and now we're losing hope that he might even ever come over. He's down at number 57.
Well, Ross, this is the exact type of player that I was talking about, that why it's such a good exercise to do the organizational value rankings. This is a third-round pick that I think a lot of Sens fans have kind of forgotten about, so we're here to remind you. I don't know if I'm as down on his progression as you are, just because, Ross, what I will say is playing the entire season in the SHL is a really good sign. Before, obviously, splitting time in the J20, the Allsvenskan, getting a handful of games in the SHL. Johansson played 51 games, 5 goals, 3 assists, so not exactly lighting it up, and he certainly had a dry spell at the end of the season, but it gives me at least hope that he was never brought down or didn't get loaned to the Allsvenskan or anything like that. So that's at least a good sign for the 21-year-old here.
He's playing in the top league for sure, and he'll do that again this year with Timra, a team that also had Jonathan Dahlen back in the day. I'm not down on his progression. I'm just down on whether he's ever even going to come over, and if he does, is he going to be more than an AHL player? I used to have some high hopes for him, but now not sure. That's why he's at number 57 on our organizational value rankings. At 56, one of the 17 players that's been on this list for all 5 of the years. 55th after the first year. I should say it's Philippe Daoust, if you're not watching. 22 years old. Really tough injury situations for him the last couple of years. We thought he scored his first goal in his first AHL game. We were boots on the ground in Laval. Yep. It gets deflected. He gets an assist instead. And then did he get a goal that season? If not, he had to wait a long time.
He did not get a goal that season, Ross. In 15 games, he had 5 assists.
He's a fun player to watch in terms of he's got the hands, he's got the smarts, but it just feels like it might top out as AHL skill.
Ross, I think there's so much potential here for Daoust, but he just unfortunately can't stay healthy. Like you're looking at his last 3 seasons. He played, or 2 seasons, I should say, 9 games. But in those 9 games with Belleville, he had 7 points. So like that's pretty solid. You can't ask for much more than that. And then in the AHL, he only got 4 games last year where he had 2 points. And then he gets 5 games in the ECHL where he gets 5 points. So like, when he's healthy, he's flirting with point per game territory, but you can't have back-to-back seasons where you played 9 games combined and expect to progress too much. So that's unfortunate. I don't doubt his skill at all, but these are such key years to be on the ice, developing and growing your game, that unless he's able to play, Ross, 75% of this season, I think he's going to get really stalled and plateaued in his development, unfortunately.
And he's an 01 birthday, so he's turning 23 in November. So time's ticking for Philippe Daoust, but you can also see the potential for sure, and that's why he's up at 56 on our organizational value rankings. Last year, he was 42nd. The year before, all the way up at 37, because he had played that year where he started in pro, had the 5 assists, and then went back for his overage season with the QMJHL St. John Sea Dogs and helped them get to the Memorial Cup. I guess they're hosting the Memorial Cup, but still had a solid time back there. 47 points in 38 games, but he needs to stay healthy to take the next step. 55th on our list in both the first and second years he was on it. He signed for 1 more year at $822,000. Coming in at number 55, it is the original mythical creature, maybe the sequel to the original, because that would have been Artem Zub back in 2020. But Filip Nordberg comes in at number 55. Just an awesome guy, personality plus. We had him on the show live last summer at development camp alongside Oscar Pistol Pete Pettersson. But Nordberg on the ice, you just like to see a little bit more progression this upcoming season. He's a monster, though. 6'5", 212 pounds, and just turned 20 years old.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a classic Sens defenseman. We go
second round pick.
Classic. We go from Philippe to Filip here. Wow. Filip Nordberg.
Advanced stats.
That's what we do on this show, Ross. With the Muskegon Lumberjacks last year. So he made the trip over the Atlantic Ocean from Sweden to come play in North America. And in 52 games, he had 1 goal, 13 assists, racked up some PIMs, 80 PIMs, and it was a -7. No points in 8 playoff games, unfortunately. But Ross, I think this was a good move for him. I don't think he was going to get a lot of opportunity if he had stayed in Sweden. So I think coming over to North America, getting good time in the USHL was a good move. But I'm just not sure where Nordberg is going to go from here. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I have a hard time seeing his path to becoming an NHLer.
Exactly. But you can see the size, right? And the physicality.
Yes.
Right. And it's just like, how are you going to round out your game? So it was a bit of a drop off on the rankings for him year over year. He was 38th last year and 35th the year before. Remember, he was named captain of his Swedish junior team. We're like, oh, things are looking good. I do like the move coming over, but right now we don't even know where he's playing this year. Now, I think, and this has kind of been hush-hush, and a lot of people have been talking about Gabriel Eliasson and making his change to the CHL. I wouldn't be surprised if Filip Nordberg somehow ends up in the Canadian Hockey League this year. We know that Staios and Andlauer have a bit more familiarity with it. Don't be surprised if Filip Nordberg's playing in the CHL this year. I've been told that they're going to, quote, figure it out after rookie tournament, which is, of course, ending later today. So we'll see where Filip Nordberg ends up, but this is the second round pick, 64th overall. So the last pick of the second round. But Pilsy, thank goodness it's not opposite. You remember how high I was on Lane Hutson before the 2022 draft?
Yep.
Thank goodness it wasn't flipped. Lane Hutson went 2 picks ahead of Filip Nordberg. If it was 2 picks after, I would be singing a different tune up here right now, but it was 2 picks before in this draft class. Okay, coming in at number 54, Djibril Toure, 6'7", 203-pound right shot defenseman, and he was signed September 23rd last year. So he made enough of an impression last year at Dev Camp and then at rookie tournament that he got a contract. He's got 2 years left at $800,000. He went back for his overage season last year, was traded midway through from Windsor to Windsor from Sudbury, and it wasn't a great transition. It went to a bit better of a team, but not really, and struggled to produce the way he did in Sudbury at half the amount of points in nearly the similar amount of games. But you can see the vision with Djibril Toure. The right shot and the way he skates makes it plausible to see him having a pro career.
Yeah, for his size, he's got good mobility. And then, like you mentioned, the right shot is important. I think this was a good move for the Senators to be able to find him undrafted and pick him up without any draft
assets
or losing any assets. Yeah, exactly. So I'm excited about Djibril Toure, Ross, and I think he's going to be like a 6'7" defenseman with the Belleville Senators this season.
Like Sebrango's role last year.
Yeah, kind of like that. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I think maybe it would actually be a good thing if he spends a bit of time in the ECHL as well.
Definitely. You just want this guy to be playing games. Yep. And I think you just have this raw talent. And again, maybe this is the Sens thought process too. When they go with these large players, is sometimes those are the guys that take a little bit longer to develop because they're still growing into their body and doing all that. So I'm going to be excited to watch Djibril Toure. And not sure if you knew this, but he and Pierre Dorian's son played together. So there was that connection when they signed him that, oh, don't you remember being in the hallway in Hawkesbury back when he played Junior A for the Hawks? Shout out the good people of Hawkesbury. And he also played a little bit in Carleton Place a few years ago before moving on to Sudbury. Djibril Toure makes his debut on our organizational value rankings at number 54. Coming in at number 53, a player we just compared him to, role-wise, Donovan Sebrango. Sebrango's 6'1", 194, 22 years old, left shot defenseman, acquired in the Alex DeBrincat trade. Pilsy, it's so funny. We're talking about all these 6'5", 6'7" defensemen for Ottawa and their organization. Does Donovan Sebrango probably plays meaner and more physical than most of those guys?
Yeah, he does. And I love the way Sebrango plays, and our pal Sean Fafaro from Kitchener Rangers told us a lot of good things about Sebrango. Definitely a fan favorite there, and he seems like he's the kind of guy you want in your system to, I don't know how to word this, but like show the rest of the guys that it's not always going to be an easy path, but you got to work hard and you got to be consistent to keep that grind going. I feel like that's something Donovan Sebrango does. Good Ottawa boy, 22 years old, left shot defenseman, 6'1", 194 pounds. He spent 35 games with the Belleville Senators last season where he had 7 assists, had a cup of coffee in the ECHL, 4 games, 1 goal, 1 assist. But I think he's going to be kind of I don't know if he's going to spend much time in the ECHL this year, Ross. I think they're going to want a guy that can play his style in Belleville. I think David Bell will like the player and person Sebrango is. So I think he's going to get a bit more of a crack at Belleville this year.
I completely agree. I think he's going to be an important player for Belleville last year. Look, didn't put up a whole lot of points last year in the regular season. Had 3 in 7 games, though, in the playoffs. But he is going to be kind of like your enforcer on the back end, who's a lot of what he brings is protecting teammates, throwing big hits, and just being a complete mutant. And you need that in the AHL when you're playing 3-3 and you're playing against some monsters on the other side. He fell in our organizational value rankings from 40 to 53. But honestly, Pilsy, I do see a path forward where he's a contributing member to a good AHL team in Belleville this year. So I'm excited to see how his offensive game rounds out. That's going to be the big question. He's got a bomb from the point. I'd like to see him use it a little bit more. But Donovan Sebrango comes in at number 53. He's got 1 more year left on his contract this year at $828,000. Okay, number 52 on our list is Wyatt Bongiovanni, acquired midway through last season from the Manitoba Moose. And man, he had a little bit of a spark as a middle 6 forward. He makes his debut on our list at number 52, standing 6 feet tall, 194 pounds.
Ross, I think Wyatt Bongiovanni can give a lot.
Say it again.
Wyatt Bongiovanni.
There you go.
I think he can give a lot of credit to Stephen Halliday for the organization looking fondly upon him, because those two, when they were put together, they were a dynamic duo. And Halliday even told us he loves playing with them. So I think that reflected really well on Bongiovanni.
Couple college kids.
Yeah, yep. And last year with Belleville, in 14 games, he had 8 goals in 14 games, 2 assists, 10 points. And then even in the playoffs, he was producing as well, 4 points in 7 games. I like this kid. I hope they find a way to keep him attached at the hip with Stephen Halliday. He's the perfect kind of guy that can
shooter.
Yeah, he's a shooter, and he's someone that Stephen Halliday, who doesn't have a lot of speed, he can kind of buzz and use Bongiovanni to keep the play going quicker. So I like this kid. I think he's going to be a good fit, and he's going to be probably a middle 6 guy that they're going to attach to Halliday to get a spark if they need it.
I like him a lot. He's a smart kid, too. Quinnipiac, former player there. He's a captain there, too, brings leadership qualities. And I'm really happy they brought him into the fold because he matched his goal output in 14 games with Belleville as he had in 34 games to start the season in Manitoba. So I'm excited that they brought him back. I think he deserved the contract. 1 year, $775,000. And we'll see what happens this year with Wyatt Bongiovanni. Coming in at number 51, wrapping up today's portion of our organizational value rankings, we are in the prospects tier, 9th tier out of 10. And I think this is the first player that some people are going to get mad at our rankings. Tomas Hamara is our player at number 51, 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, 20 years old. And I think that might be lost on me a little bit, how young he still is. He's a 3-time World Junior player, and he had a good year, but the offense wasn't taking that next step that we figured it would in the OHL.
Yeah, and I think, Ross, he was also a victim, and again, we're mentioning Sean Fafaro a lot on the show, but he's got a lot of great info when it comes to the Kitchener Rangers. He mentioned to us that Hamara kind of got caught in a spot where he just got put down in the lineup too far, and he wasn't getting the opportunities he and the team felt he deserved, so that's why they worked out a trade to Brantford, and I think that was great for him, as he really popped off. Like, he only had 3 assists in 18 games with the Rangers. Then he goes to Brantford and puts up 17 points in 26 games. So a much needed change for him. He got 1 game with the Belleville Senators. I'm going to be very interested to see how David Bell uses Hamara here, because he's not Bellsy's typical defenseman that he likes to use, really, right? And I think there's going to be some opportunity for him at the start of the year to show what he has offensively. And I think if Hamara can have a good showing, he could be a guy that could be the quarterback of a second power play unit in Belleville if things go well. So hopefully he gets off to a hot start.
Agreed. It's just a matter of how he's going to get that ice time, because he and Jorian Donovan, who have been kind of attached at the hip since being drafted 2 rounds apart, Hamara first in the 3rd round back in 2022. Now that they're both turning pro, it's like they're both left shot defensemen. If you're going to pick one, Donovan certainly had the more impressive season where he was able to really make a difference and make an impact at both ends of the ice. So hopefully Hamara has it in him. I do think that there's definitely some upside on this player. He was really good internationally last year, 7 points in 7 games at the World Juniors. He did get 1 game in the AHL, that meaningless game where Igor had to go incognito in Laval for the last game of the year after they clinched that playoff spot. But it'll be a very intriguing year for Hamara. I'll say that. At 51 on our organizational value rankings, he was 41 last year and 36 right after his draft. So we want to see that number climb back. His entry-level contract has been sliding until this year. 3 years, $803,000 on his deal. Okay, Pilsy, we have just hammered through this ranking, and we're going to continue to do so. It's going to be our 2nd and 3rd segment probably for the rest of this week, but we've got so much Senators action to get to as well. So this was all the tier of prospects. We also have 2 more players at the 3 more players at the top of this tier before we get to tier number 8. We appreciate everybody for being with us. I know it's kind of funny. We're telling our friends ironically or non-ironically, like, yeah, we're going to rank the Senators players. Oh, like Timmy, Brady, Sanderson. We're like, no. Nicholas Van Tassel and Owen Beckner. Who's higher? Come on, let's get into it. But hey, for completeness sake, I think people appreciate that we start at the bottom and we work our way all to the top. Top 50 starting tomorrow at Sens Central. It means a lot to us that we are a part of your Senators routine. We're here day in, day out, just trying to make it a little bit better to be an Ottawa Senators fan. That's our goal, and we appreciate everybody for coming along with the ride. We want to get you all these great interviews, and year 5 of our organizational value rankings. So much fun. Let's get to that, and apologies are in order to Jameson Rees, Pilsy. Hand up. We completely forgot about him. So we're going to be doing our second 51st ranked player, but everyone's going to get pushed back. I told you yesterday, and we put it in the description, we're going to have our list. So you can go and see everything in a compact area. But shout out Jameson Rees. And he's actually higher on this list than any of the guys we're doing today. All right, Pilsy, we're back to our organizational value rankings. A reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at Sens Central. You can give us your thoughts on our list. Where did we go wrong? Where do you think that we're right? And who do you think should be in the very top tier? It's going to take us a while to get there, but it's worth the trip to the top of the mountain. The views are spectacular, and it will coincide with preseason hockey coming back to the Ottawa Senators airwaves, and we will be with you every step of the way. We're thinking about doing some sort of stream in the preseason because we want to almost use it as a reset for everybody to throw comments in and all that, but we'll have more information on that closer to the date. And of course, we're coming to Ottawa for the home opener, and we do have our plans intact. Pre-game at the Glebe Central Pub. Pre-game at the Glebe Central Pub. So you can get in there for free. And if you're driving to the game, whatever, responsibly, of course, you can welcome to join us at the Glebe Central Pub before. But for all of us sickos who are going to be enjoying ourselves in a number of ways, we've got the bus there for you. $17 round trip. You can get your tickets on the Glebe Central Pub website. Billsy, we've done this trip, the pilgrimage, many times, and it never gets old. It's always so much fun interacting with other Sens fans and having the wheels on the bus go round and round and knowing that the destination is the Canadian Tire Center. Nothing like it.
Yeah, I love the anticipation. Sue gets us there ASAP, so it's always a good time.
So good. Okay, always a good time on our organizational value rankings. You can see the full list in the link below. But for now, we are jumping right into it with number 51. Pilsy, the first goalie on our rankings. 51 is Vladimir Nikitin.
Yeah, our guy, Vladimir Nikitin, we had him on the show a little earlier in the year. Kazakhstan goalie. Just
Stand up.
A goalie factory over in Kazakhstan. Vladimir Nikitin played with the Chilliwack Chiefs in the BCHL last year, and pretty decent season as far as a young goalie coming over. In 25 games, he had a 15-6-3 record, a 2.76 goals against, an 898 save percentage, a shutout. And Ross, I was banging the table to add an extra stat to our goalie graphics card. Goals. He did score a goal last year, but I couldn't. That's a battle I lost on the stat space here.
Do you think that the Senators goaltenders have the most combined goals in the organization? I should say active, because I guess Marty Brodeurs in the Blues organization, but Ullmark scored a goal 2 years ago.
Yep.
And then Nikitin scored a goal last year in the BCHL. He got off to such a tough start last year, coming over the adjustment period, spoke no English, and I think that really impacted his performance. But as you saw him get more and more comfortable throughout the year, he was putting in a number more good performances. Now, I actually wish he had stayed in the BCHL. Instead, he went home, and you can never fault someone for trying to make some money. We don't know his situation, but we know that he signed a KHL contract for this season. Now, he has not played in any games with Beres Astana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but it's the Kazakh team in the KHL. I'm hoping and assuming that he's going to get some work with the under 20 team, or the MHL team, I believe it's called there. And really, the highlight of the season for Sens fans with Nikitin is that Kazakhstan will be in the World Juniors.
Yep.
They are in Ottawa in December. So that'll be a huge test, because we know, and I think we've seen it year over year with like Slovaks and some other teams where they sometimes have good teams, but sometimes don't, where their goalie's making 50, 60 saves in a game. So Nikitin's going to have to be ready for that challenge. But for me, I'm just looking at him as a long-term project. He's just a little bit higher because he had some flashes where you're like, wow, this guy has so much raw potential that I think I see a little something here. But we're not going to be seeing him in Belleville, I don't think, for another 3 years. And then beyond that, like, this is a 5-6 year plan for Vladimir Nikitin.
Yeah, keep in mind he's only 19 years old. I think the biggest issue, Ross, and we'll wrap on Nikitin with this, is I think he's the third goalie on that KHL squad. Like, Sens Prospects had a tweet saying that he only has had the opportunity to back up once in the 4 games that his KHL team has played. So he's quite a few steps away from action in the KHL. So we'll see how the season progresses for him.
7th round pick, 207th overall in the 2023 draft. He'll turn 20 in January. And hey, Vladdy, we'll see you soon for that World Juniors in Ottawa. All right, coming in at number 50 on our organizational value rankings, another goalie. This one, another guest on Locked On Sens just this summer, Kevin Radler, who's making the jump from the USHL to the NCAA.
Yeah, we had an awesome time chatting with Kevin. He's a really great guy. You got to see a little bit of his personality when he was mic'd up in the Sens dev camp. And yeah, he had a great year with the Dubuque Fighting Saints in the USHL. 39 games, 27-5-2 record. Like 27 wins, 7 losses all year. That's solid. His numbers, maybe he had a high offensive team that scored a lot of goals for him, because 286 and 902 is a little lower than you'd want with that kind of record. But Ross, he shined in the playoffs in 11 games. 1.69 goals against and a 934 save percentage, matching his season total of shutouts with 3. So he was certainly able to back his team up when it came to the playoffs.
And it's so great to see him getting a consistent stretch of playing games. He's been the backup over in Sweden and things like that at the World Juniors. It's just nice to see him get an extended stretch to be able to get in. He's an enormous human being, 6'6", 203 pounds already. And he's going to have a battle on his hands at the University of Omaha, Nebraska, because he's not going to be given the net there. They've got another young prospect in goal there, Slovak kid. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but it's going to be a battle for him to be able to get every start. And they're a team that maybe doesn't have the highest of expectations, but they're in the NCHC, so they're going to be playing in North Dakota. They're going to be playing these tough buildings. I think that's going to help him. He's moved up 5 spots from last year where he came in at 55, and he was 58 the year before that. He was drafted in 2022. And again, when you're drafting goalies, you're not doing it for tomorrow. You're doing it for about a decade later. Like, even remember the 2021 draft? It was Wallstedt and Kosa. Both end up being first-round picks. Neither's played Wallsted's played 1 NHL game or 2. That's it. These are first-round picks, and Radler went in the 5th round in 2022, 151st overall. So a lot of development left for Kevin Radler, but I think that this is a good step for him to go to the NCAA, and we'll see what happens next. But certainly has some raw skill, and he's a super outgoing personality that we're rooting for on this show. So Kevin Radler comes in at number 50 on our organizational value rankings. All right, we're into the top 50, and this is the top of the tier, the prospects tier, the first prospects tier that we have here. Hoyt Stanley at 49. He moves up from 52 the year before. He's a 4th-round pick last summer. Now, he was also the Senators' first pick. They didn't have a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd rounder, but he had a nice freshman year at Cornell.
Yeah, good transition from the BCHL to NCAA. In 35 games, Hoyt had 2 goals, 8 assists, 22 PIMs, but this is where I like it, Ross, a plus 16. So he was able to be comfortable and at least not get scored on too often and help his team score goals when he was on the ice. And I like Hoyt Stanley. I think, obviously, great dude. We've had him on the show a couple times. Go check out those interviews. But
salt of the earth guy.
Oh, big time. Yeah. 6'3", 201 pounds, right shot defenseman. So I think he's probably a guy, Ross, that I think is going to play 3 seasons in the NCAA. That wouldn't surprise me. Maybe even 4. It seems like he's a guy that choosing to go to university, especially a spot like Cornell, was a big decision for him. So I think he's just getting comfortable there, and he's got a lot more runway to go.
And they had a good season at Cornell last year, and they've got some high offensive players. And I think for him, it's just a matter of establishing himself on the top pair this year. That's what we're going to be watching for Hoyt. Have maybe a little bit more offensive production while continuing to play solid defensively. And I know that he's not the kind of guy that's going to be roughing it up in the corner. So maybe we could cut those PIMs a little bit too, as he becomes stronger and a better, even better skater. He still skates well, but being able to angle guys off in the corner and maybe avoid a couple penalties that way. But overall, I think that you're looking at a very solid year-over-year progression for Hoyt Stanley, who was 52nd last year and now moves up to 49 on our Locked On Senators value rankings. All right, the next tier is AHL depth, and we're bringing in at number 48 a player who just acquired this offseason, signing a 1-year ticket for league minimum, but a $350,000 paycheck at the AHL level. Hayden Hodgson comes in, and he's going to bring that grit as a middle 6 AHLer.
Yeah, I would even say bottom 6, Ross. That the top 6 of Belleville's team is going to be very hard to crack. And for a guy that only had 16 points last year and 116 PIMs, I don't think he's going to even crack the second line in Belleville. It's going to be competitive there. This seems like a bit of a protect the investments type of move, right? Like I see a lot of similarities between Hayden Hodgson's and Scott Sabrin. So you need guys like that in the AHL. So I'm not dogging Hodgson's here. He has had a couple of games in the NHL as well, 7 total games with the Philadelphia Flyers throughout the years. But I think this is the type of guy where Ryan Bowness is looking at his Belleville roster and saying, all right, we lost a bit of grit last year, especially with Imama leaving. So let's try to get some of that back. And I think Hayden Hodgson will do a good job of bringing that element to the Belleville Sens.
He's also got a moment under his belt, right? It's about making a moment and an impression at training camp. And you might know his name from his preseason last year with the Ontario Reign, where he did not take any prisoners with the Stanley Cup champs, rocking Mark Stone behind the net in a preseason game. Stone was disgusted by the hit, calling him out in public afterwards. But I want my gritty players being a little bit greasy too. Shouldn't have been standing there. Should have kept your head up. Hayden Hodgson's coming through the trolley tracks. He's a 28-year-old from Windsor, Ontario, 6'2", 207 pounds, and he's going to be that Boko Imama replacement in Belleville. Okay, number 47 on our organizational value rankings. This, to me, is the Dylan Hetherington left shot replacement on the back end. Filip Roos, 6'4", 190 pounds. He's only 25 years old. Pilsy, he's got the range, but hasn't really been able to crack that next step to be an everyday NHLer. And now he's taken a two-way contract to a new organization here after spending his entire North American career, 2 seasons split between Chicago and Rockford. Now he'll come over and try to make his impact in Belleville.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison, Ross. This does seem like the Dylan Hetherington replacement, because Hetherington was kind of your more defensive-leaning two-way guy, and that's what Filip Roos seems to be like here, although
little less physical than Hetherington.
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know, actually. He's got some decent size. Maybe it's 6'4", but only 190 pounds. So maybe he doesn't have that frame.
He's kind of like that lanky. It feels like everything I'm reading about him, he's more of an offensive-minded player. Like he's going to be the guy that's going to be carrying the puck up the ice a fair bit on his pair. He's okay with handling the puck, but I just want to see him in a new scenery, right? He's just been over there for quite some time. He had a couple decent seasons before coming over in the Allsvenskan, and I know we're rewinding the clock a little bit here, but I think that this could be a solid AHL top 4 defenseman.
Yeah, I think unfortunately every season, AHL or NHL, he's been in the minuses and plus minus. Now that's not everything, but you'd like to see a little more stability there.
Where did he play?
I mean, yeah, playing in Chicago is not great, but so I'm not going to put a lot of blame on him there. But in the AHL, hopefully he can provide some depth stability on that back end.
I want to move on to 46 right away because these two were signed the same day. And Jeremy Davies, this is going to be a fun player to watch. Like left shot defenseman, but offensively gifted for 35 points in 66 games, 12 goals from the back end. And this was different than the classic prototype for the Senators. Jeremy Davies is 5'11", 190, 27 years old, but still plays with grit, 79 penalty minutes last year with the Rochester Americans. So they know him well from within the division in the AHL last year. What are your thoughts on Jeremy Davies?
I like the signing, Ross. You mentioned he's able to score goals back-to-back years with the Rochester Americans in double-digit goals. He had 11 the year before. 35 total points. And this is a guy, Ross, I think we're going to see him playing in the top 4 of Belleville. And I think he's probably going to be a part of a second power play unit as well. So I think this is a good guy to bring in, 27 years old, has experience in the AHL, even a bit of NHL experience, and a Quebec guy. So you get a little francophone in the Belleville system as well.
Yeah, it's great. And I think you look at his career in the AHL, 126 points in 257 games. That's a ton of experience. Has played 23 games between Nashville and then 2 years ago got 1 game with the Buffalo Sabres. So I'm excited to see how it works out for Jeremy Davies. I think he could be a power play contributor as well in Belleville. He comes in making his debut on the organizational value rankings at number 46. Moving on to number 45, a player who could very well get NHL games again this year, has familiarity with head coach Travis Green at the NHL level from their time with the Vancouver Canucks, and was name dropped by Travis Green recently on a radio interview with the TSN 1200 crew as a guy who could play wing and center. So Matthew Highmore is versatile, but didn't do a whole heck of a lot, at least versus my expectations in Belleville. He came over Pilsy the year before, and he was like over a point per game in Springfield, and it just felt like the offensive game took a step back. Now, I say that, he still had 31 points in 43 games, but kind of felt like he left you wanting a little more, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, Ross, that's where I was going to take off from your point there. He was not very effective in Belleville's playoffs, which was unfortunate because the responsibility up front kind of fell to a lot of the inexperienced guys. Like Stephen Halliday was a guy that had to really pick up the slack when you were hoping guy like Matthew Highmore would be able to do that. But these are the types of players you need to have in your organization, guys that have a pro mindset. They know what the grind of a full season is like. He's been in the NHL, the AHL for quite a while now. So he's someone that can be a leader on Belleville, and I think that's why he was brought back for another season.
And that's just what he was. Re-signed 1 year at $775,000, but he did play 7 games with the Ottawa Senators this past season and had 2 assists. So we'll see, because he got a big AHL salary as well.
Yep.
So there's going to be a bit of pressure on Matthew Highmore, I think, to take a step forward. Otherwise, he might be looking for a new organization after next year. Basically doubles down in our rankings. He was 44 last year, 45 this season. Coming in at number 44, one of the 17 players that has been on this list for all 5 years that we've done it. It's Cole Reinhardt, 6'1", 207 pounds, and got into 56 games last year in the AHL. The offensive production hasn't really taken a step forward, but I wonder how much of that is the coaching and Dave Bell and the organization telling him, look, if you're going to carve out a role in the NHL, it's going to be as a fourth-line energy player. So maybe instead of going for that extra step towards the slot, let's maybe take a step towards our own zone and be ready in transition and play solid defensively while playing physical.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Ross. And I mean, even in junior, Cole Reinhardt wasn't a offensive powerhouse, right? He never had a year where he was a point per game guy, although
he was an overager at the year that he ended up getting drafted too, right? We're at the Brandon Wheat Kings.
Yeah, and I'm cutting him short here. In 56 games, he had 55 points, so I'm really getting it close there. But what I'm getting at is it's not like he had to drastically change his game when he went from junior to the AHL. I think Cole Reinhardt could be a guy that Oscar Pettersson could look at and be like, all right, I'm going to have to find a way to be hardworking forechecker that is going to carve out a pro role for me. And he's one of those guys that, yeah, the numbers might not pop out on the page, but ask the coaching staff about him and they see him as a very reliable guy that they want in their lineup. So I think it's going to be an interesting year for Cole Reinhardt. He's been in Belleville for a while now. He's played 225 games with the Belleville Senators.
Would you like a little trivia?
Yes, I love trivia.
Where does he rank in games played with Belleville?
Got to be number 1.
Nope. Igor Sokolov's number 1. You knew that.
I should have known that.
Yeah. He's 15 games away from tying Igor Sokolov. He's second.
So he's going to get there.
And his next point will be his 100th AHL point.
Oh, there we go. I think he's going to hit those milestones, Ross.
Just as an aside, so funny, Michael Del Zotto had 27 points in 26 games in the AHL. That's neither here nor there, but I do feel so bad for Reinhardt that his one NHL game, he was in the penalty box when the game winner went in. That was tough. So hopefully he gets another opportunity because he brings a ton of speed. He certainly does. Last year, he was 47th on our list. The year before, he was 34 after he had a bump up in his second season in Belleville. 42nd in 2021 and number 60 right after being drafted as an overage pick a little bit later on. I think that it's impressive even that a 6th round pick, 181st overall, has given your organization that much production, even though it's in an AHL role. So, hey, good locker room guy, I'm sure, and he's back 1 year at $775K.
And just one more thing on Cole Reinhardt. I think it's important to note, too, that he's never spent any time in the ECHL. So that kind of goes to show that this is a guy that they want in Belleville and they value there.
And they put him in right after the draft. I know he was drafted as an overager, but just boom, right in. Number 43 on our organizational value rankings, Garrett Pilon. This is the first player on our AHL depth. And honestly, I think this is a big year for Garrett Pilon. He is the only guy of all the ones we talked about today to earn a 2-year contract. Yeah. Everyone else was 1 year. Pilsy wore a letter. He was producing. He was an awesome interview with us after the first round of the playoffs. And unlike Highmore and Reinhart, who kind of disappeared in the playoffs, Garrett Pilon played his best hockey when it mattered most.
I'm a big, Ross, get the quote board out, Pilsy, big Pilsy guy. Pilsy is a Pilsy guy because Garrett Pilon was a big part of the reason why the Belleville Senators were able to have success in 62 games last year, 18 goals, 29 assists for 47 points. And as you mentioned, 5 points in 7 playoff games. I just felt like this guy brought so much confidence to the offensive side of the game in Belleville. When he was out there, you felt like he was giving opponents a tough time, keeping handles on him. He's setting guys up. He's able to score as well. I feel like he had some big moment goals that throughout the season, if he doesn't step up in those moments, they're not able to win a handful of games. So Garrett Pilon, I'm glad not only, Ross, that they brought him back, but they give him a little extra and give him that second year on top of that contract.
Just under 6 feet tall. He's 26 years old. And an underrated part of the game, those right shot players, feels like there's less of them, at least in the Sens organization. So to have him in the mix here, he's up 7 spots. He was 50 on our list last year, 43rd this year. And I wonder how much him being able to step up in the playoffs was because he'd been there, done that. He won the Calder Cup with the Hershey Bears the year before and had a couple big goals during that playoff run. But certainly a guy like, of all the new guys last year, Highmore, Josh Curry, Garrett Pilon, among others, Pilon really was the guy who elevated and, to me, kind of distinguished himself from those other guys. So big Pilsy guys on this show. He comes in at number 43 on our organizational value rankings. Pilsy, we are already through 3 tiers already out of 10 on our list. So we're going to continue the countdown each and every day here on Locked On Senators. So stay tuned tomorrow where we will get back into the next tier of prospects. Now, why did we break up the prospect tiers, Pilsy? I think it's pretty fair. Like, the ones who are below, it's like, if they never make it, how can you say that they're better than an AHL player who's already established? And certain guys who we just spoke about, they already have NHL games under their belt.
Yeah, and that's the tough balance of prospects that have such a long runway to go versus guys that are already been there, done that, but they don't have much more potential to reach. That's where it's hard to kind of value it, but that's the way we went.
Pilsy, let's get right back to our organizational value rankings. And there is a list in the comments. If you want to follow along, we're doing as many as we can day after day after day. And we've got the full list running there. You can click and see it at your own leisure. Coming in at number 42, a high riser, up 14 spots from last year. It's left shot defenseman Theo Wallberg.
Yeah, Theo Wallberg has been one of those prospects that goes under the radar, but shouldn't. As a 6'5", 203-pound defenseman, 6th round pick in the 2022 draft. Last year in Ohio State, in 38 games, 2 goals, 19 assists for 21 points. And that's pretty good numbers for a defenseman in college, especially, Ross, when you compare it to his previous season in the USHL. In 60 games, he had 22 points. So in Math Guy, 22 less games in a tougher league going from USHL to NCAA. He only had 1 less point. So that's great progression for Wallberg.
And not only that, but we talked to Stephen Halliday, his teammate at Ohio State last year, and he was just super impressed, not only at the transition, but the mobility for his size. So standing 6'5", 203, you're expecting, those big prototype defensemen. The Sens have so many, but he's super mobile and he's got a great first pass. So I think him going into his sophomore year at Ohio State, he'll take on more responsibility, and it's been a longer road for him as a 2022 pick and just playing his freshman year this past season. But patience, I feel like, will pay off with Theo Wallberg. I think at the very least, he'll be a top 4 AHL defenseman, but certainly has pro ability, and I'm excited to see what's next. Of course, he's unsigned, but up 14 spots, was 56 last year and 59 right after being drafted in 2022. All right, coming in at number 41, we're on a run of the 2024 draft right now, including 3 4th-round picks that all got rave reviews from the scouting community. It starts with number 41, Lucas Ellinas. We just saw him at rookie tournament. He will be at main camp as well. He's a breakout candidate in the Ontario Hockey League this season with the Kitchener Rangers, was just given a letter on his jersey. He'll be the alternate captain on Matthew Andonovski's team. And Pilsy, the playoffs certainly gave a hint at what could come next.
Yeah, talk about a rookie season for Lucas Ellinas with the Kitchener Sens. 67 games, 16 goals, 17 assists, 33 points. But like you mentioned, the playoffs is where he shined. In 10 playoff games, 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points in 10 playoff games. And I think he's well deserving of a letter in Kitchener. He's going to join Matthew Andonovski as part of that leadership group there. And he's poised to have a big season, Ross. I love this pick by the Sens in the 4th round.
I love it too. And not only that, Pills, he's so nice. He grew up an Ottawa Senators fan in the heart of enemy territory. So we like that. We're really going to be rooting for Ellinas. He's got some piss and vinegar in his game too. He's not going to back down from anyone. Got in a fight in the rookie tournament. And to me, he's going to add an element that the Senators are going to need down the road. So excited to see Lucas Ellinas take another step forward this year in Kitchener and hopefully get some reps at center. It would be nice, I think, to kind of learn. And we always know it's easier to move to wing than to center. He played a bunch of wing at the rookie tournament. The last game they moved him to center. So I hope that he plays in the middle in Kitchener, but wherever he is, you're going to notice him as a breakout candidate for them. Coming in at number 40, it's Blake Montgomery. Just an awesome skater. Stands 6'4", 181 pounds, and he turned some heads at development camp. He was one of the more noticeable young players on the ice there. 43 points in 58 games last year in Lincoln, and he's taking the extra year of the USHL, and he's 19 years old. So much like Theo Wallberg, he'll be a 20-year-old freshman in college next season.
Yeah, and I think it's good that he's taking another year in the USHL, especially the Lincoln Stars. That seems to be a good program from what we've seen and heard. And I think another year of that, he's going to be able to probably get close to a point per game pace, Ross, if he continues developing. 43 points in 58 games last year. So I like this move by Montgomery, and this is yet another player in the 4th round. When we started looking into scouting reports and what online scouts thought of him, a lot of great praise for the value that the Sens got with this pick.
A play-driving power winger with speed to burn, according to the Elite Prospects 2024 NHL Draft Guide. When you're big and powerful skater, that's a sick combination, and he's got some sweet hands in there, as shown by the 22 goals he scored last season in Lincoln. All right, coming in at number 39, it's Javon Moore, the third of the electric 4th round in the 2024 draft. And you talk about electric. Imagine being a Minnetonka U.S. high school hockey fan last year. What a treat watching this 6'4", 203-pound forward just tear apart that league.
Yeah, he had a lot of fun playing in that high school league in 28 games. 26 goals, 27 assists for 53 points. That's pretty awesome. He did get a cup of coffee, or a shot of espresso, I should say, in the USHL. 3 games, 1 assist. It seems likely that he'll be returning to Sioux Falls and then going to University of Minnesota after. Ross, these Minnesota hockey kids, it's inevitable that they go to University of Minnesota. They can't help themselves. I feel like, honestly, for a lot of them, the dream is to play University of Minnesota hockey, and whatever happens after is all just bonus. So Javon Moore, look out for this guy.
Oh, he's going to be one of those guys who I think not this year, but next year bursts onto the scene when he's heading to the University of Minnesota, home state school. We know they've pumped out a ton of NHL talent. I'm really curious to see what's next for Javon Moore, because you look at Elite Prospects, they called him the second best prospect in the Sens pipeline behind Carter Yakimchuk. In their draft profile, they say transitionally, Moore's game is full of large area handling and separation, a crafty player who uses delays to open room and disrupt gaps. And he gets in positions to shoot quite often. Javon Moore certainly could be a guy who rockets up these rankings next year. He comes in at 39. And shout out to Pesky Sickos on Twitter. Unreal photos from Dev Camp, so appreciate him. Pesky Sickos, make sure you're following him. He's got great clips too. All right, coming in at number 38, it's Gabriel Eliasson. I'm surprised we found a photo to fit in that frame. 6'7", 216 pounds. And Pilsy, he just turned 18 last week.
Yeah, Gabriel Eliasson, we've been seeing a lot of him recently in the rookie tournament. Now he's going to take part in the Sens training camp as well. Last year, he spent the majority of his time with the J20 National League in HV 71 in 36 games, 1 goal, 5 assists. Where his numbers really pop, though, Ross, is the PIMs, 103 of them. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up playing this season. As we know, typically his involvement with the Senators means he is excluded himself from playing in the USHL or NCAA, where he was slated to join University of Michigan. So it doesn't seem like that's going to happen, at least anytime soon.
No, I doubt it. I think he's going to probably take the OHL route. Don't be surprised if he ends up with the Barrie Colts, but time will tell. Now, imports can't be traded until September 20-something. So nothing.
The 26th.
Nothing can be made official until then. Good call. So let's see what happens with Gabriel Eliasson. We've got plenty of Eliasson content if you want to learn more about him, including an interview with him earlier this summer after being selected. Models his game after Erik Chernak and after Nicholas Hague in Vegas. So those are two players that if you know how they play, you'll know how Gabriel Eliasson wants to end his development curve. We are in our second prospect here right now in the organizational value rankings. It's the 5th annual organizational value rankings, and we are going to put them all together at the very end and make it one super video that will probably premiere on a Sunday, and you can go check out the chat, hang out. Basically, if you want to talk Sens anytime that day, leading into the first week of the regular season, head over to YouTube among all the citizens and have your say of how you feel about our list and the season coming up. All right, coming in at number 37 on our organizational value rankings, a new player who was given a new opportunity midway through last season. Jameson Rees joined the Belleville Senators, and I thought he fit in a depth role enough that he earned an extension on his contract.
Yeah, I mean, Jameson Rees, the story for him is he hasn't really been given the proper opportunities in the past. And when you look at where he was before Belleville, you can kind of see that. And even in Belleville, I don't think they quite figured out the proper way to use him. In 51 games in the AHL between 3 different teams, no goals, unfortunately, 8 assists, -4, 22 PIMs. This is a year where Jameson Rees has to figure out a way to get involved. If it's not going to be by scoring points, he's going to have to figure out different ways to impress Coach David Bell in Belleville. And I'm not doubting the talent, Ross. I just think he's going to have to find a way to get back to where he was.
He's a bit of Angus Crookshank, but maybe not with the upside that we've seen that Crooker has, because he does play that snarl, that gritty, that ratty game. But at 5'11", 172 and 23 years old, you do have to bring a little bit of offense to the table as well. And I think he'll get an opportunity here in training camp, both with Ottawa and with Belleville, to show that he has the capability to be a contributing member of an AHL team. Got that 1-year extension, so he's playing for his next contract as well. And he makes his debut in our organizational value rankings at 37. A bit of an unknown, but at the same time, I think that you look at scouts who have watched him from his time as a draft eligible player and then into his first pro season, you're looking at still a guy with some tools that could get him to be an everyday player at least the top 6 AHL level, and we'll see if it translates for there. But I think this is a good spot for a guy who I'm going to be interested in watching this season. You said naturally, though, Pills, he should be a favorite for me, though, eh?
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 of your favorite things, Jameson and Reese's Pieces. So Jameson Rees should be a guy you're looking out for, Ross.
I promise I can't just have one Reese. I need the apostrophe S. I need multiple pieces of my Reese's. Okay, he makes his debut at 37. Coming in at number 36, it's Tyler Boucher. We don't need to tell you where he was drafted. What we do need to know is how's he going to look in a full season, because unfortunately injuries have been the story for the 6'1", 205-pound right shot right winger from New Jersey.
Yeah, Ross, I'll even set the bar a little lower for the games played. Let's see what he can do in half a season, because unfortunately, his most games played was in 2021, 2022, when he played 24 games with the 67s. Now, he did play 17 games with Boston University before then, so total of 41 games, but it's we don't need to get too far into it. We know Tyler, good kid. He's putting a lot of work in. Just unfortunately, the injury concerns. If you can't play, you can't develop. And that's where Tyler Boucher has found himself. But he seems like he's ready to go. And I think David Bell is going to do a lot to help him out this season.
He's got a great mindset, and that's all you can do when you've been dealt a hand of cards that has some low numbers in it with the time missed during injuries. Last year, he was 23rd on our organizational value rankings. The year before, 17th. And right after the draft, he was 14th. So he comes in at 36, but I think there should be the asterisk that he just needs to play, because when he does play, we saw him at World Juniors. He was actually really good.
Yeah,
before he suffered that injury. And that was his last time really getting a flow before coming in midway through the season and not being able to find his footing too well. So we're rooting for him, man. We're in his corner, and I'd love to see him prove the doubters wrong with a great season this year. But we've covered him extensively this summer, from our top prospects to the rookie tournament. So Tyler Boucher comes in at number 36. He has 2 years left on his entry-level contract that pays him $863 against the cap annually. He had 2 goals, 5 points in 21 games last year. All right, coming in at number 35, a high riser on our organizational value rankings from 57 last year to 35 this year. It's the captain of the Kitchener Rangers, Matthew Andonovski.
Yeah, he had a big year last year, Ross, because before that, he had played in 110 OHL games with 0 goals. So he clearly had the mindset, all right, I've got this figured out defensively. He's a great defensive defenseman. But if I'm going to make a pro career, I have to be able to chip in offensively. And it didn't take long to do that, Ross. He did it on opening night with the Kitchener Rangers last season, and he put 7 goals in 65 games, adds 25 assists, good for 32 points. But the real number here
numbers.
Numbers. Yeah, two big ones coming up. He led the entire OHL in plus minus with plus 58. I don't give a damn what you think about plus minus stats. If you're plus 58, you're doing something right. And he's not making it easy on players when he's up against them either. 124 PIMs too. So this is going to be a huge year for Matthew Andonovski. And Ross, we teased it before, but I've been thinking more about it. I think he could be a dark horse candidate for Team Canada in this World Juniors.
People are saying.
People have said. I've heard people talk about this.
I think we talk about it. People are talking about it. Let's keep it rolling. Let's get a great start to the season for Matthew Andonovski, going back to Kitchener, where he could be a guy who brings that team to a surprising season. They're in their part of their cycle where they're probably looking ahead to the Memorial Cup in a couple of years.
Yes.
Maybe he's a trade chip at some point this season, but we know with the C on his chest, he's going to do everything for that team to get over the hump. But he's already up 22 spots year over year on our list. And his offensive game rounding out what we know brings physicality and defensive responsibility. He's going to be a guy to watch this season in the organization. He just signed his entry-level contract this summer. But by going back to junior, which is in all likelihood what's going to happen, it's either NHL or junior for him, he's going to get to push that to next year. So he'll have all 3 years of his entry-level contract. All right, coming in at number 34, it's Pistol Pete, pew pew, Oscar Pettersson. He was 28th on our organizational value rankings last year, 39th after being drafted in 2022. He came over midway through last season, and much like Jameson Rees, that's tough to play J20, SHL, and Belleville all in 1 year. So I'm excited to see what a full year of Oscar Pettersson under Dave Bell looks like.
Yeah, and I think last year was a really good learning experience for him, because David Bell didn't just hand him the keys to the car and said, here you go. He had to deal with being a healthy scratch throughout the playoffs, Ross, and that's tough. And that's something that I think Oscar has looked at and said, how am I going to make sure that I'm providing value in this lineup, and he's focused a lot on his forechecking abilities. And if he can forecheck and keep that play alive in the offensive zone, he's going to have more opportunities to show off the rest of his game, and including that wicked shot that we know he has. So I'm very excited for Oscar Pettersson's season in Belleville.
And just to see where he's at as an offensive threat, because I think that he can always fall back on being responsible defensively. I think we'll see him on Belleville's top penalty killing unit at some point this season, but it's what's your offensive upside? It doesn't have to be the guy who is scoring almost a goal per game in junior, but it can't be the guy who has not much offense either. It has to be at least somewhere in the middle. And he knows that Patrick Hornqvist prototype that he always talks about, being a pain in the ass, being a guy who can play with great players and complement them well. And I think that's what we're going to see Oscar Pettersson try to accomplish this year in Belleville. He's got 3 years left on his entry-level deal at $835,000. All right, coming in at number 33, one of the newer members of the organization, Xavier Borgo, right shot, right winger, 33rd on our list, making his debut this year. He's 21 years old, 6 foot, 172 pounds. Pilsy, the pro career hasn't started the way that his minor league or amateur career ended, where he was just an elite prospect and helped win the QMJHL for Chicoutimi or whatever team he was on.
Shawinigan.
Hey, close.
Yep. I think Borgo is very similar to Jameson Rees. Untapped potential, I think, is a way to look at these players. Because,
well, if there's one thing we know about the CTC, the taps are always ice cold.
Well, we're hoping they heat up here with Borgo and Rees, because people forget he's a first-round pick in 2021, 22nd overall. Ross, we actually covered him in our prospect profiles. But last year with Bakersfield, 55 games, 8 goals, 12 assists, 20 points. Obviously not what he's looking for, because the year before he had 34 points in 62 games. So I think he can get closer to that 40-point range if he's put in the right situation. And it's not going to be easy for him. Like, he's coming from Bakersfield, coming to Belleville. This roster is stacked. So if he's going to find a place on power play units or in the top 6, he's going to have to work for it. And I'm excited to see what Borgo can bring in a new opportunity, new scenery, everything like that.
So we already know the Senators have invested more in veterans at the AHL level. Well, get this. Our last 3 players we just talked about, Borgo, Pettersson, Boucher, all right shot, right wingers who will be in Belleville. So there's going to be a lot of internal competition for those roles on the right side. Borgo, for me, is a guy who just needs to be able to be more consistent. There were a couple 2-point games he had last year out of his 20 points. And it's just, there's a lot of stretches where he goes a month without getting a point. And it's like, okay, we need to find a level of consistency. And who knows, that organization in Edmonton, they're obviously not majorly focused on developing prospects. They're looking at winning now. Now, that to say, they end up getting Roby Yarventi in that trade. Yep. And I'll go on record, I wouldn't have done that trade. I think Yarventi's got a lot of high upside talents within his game. Borgo, jury's out. Maybe he does too, but I think he's going to bring a little more speed and tenacity on the puck that Yarventi certainly didn't have. He was more of that Hoffman-esque, hey, I'm a shooter, I'll shoot, but otherwise it's not maybe as well-rounded of a game. But we'll see what Borgo's got on the table. He'll be a guy who I have circled through preseason in the NHL to see where he's at. And it's also a contract year for him, Pilsy. He's going into the final year of his first contract at $925K.
Yep. On to the next guy.
Some coming in at number 32. You wanted to get to him because it's a goalie. We got another goalie. Our third goalie on the list. We had Vladimir Nikitin at 51, Kevin Radler at 50, and now coming in at 32, it's Leevi Merilainen, 6'2", 158 pounds.
That is light. That is a light goalie coming in, Ross. I was saying to you, that's about my dimensions when I was in grade 11 in high school. So certainly skinnier goalie than usual. You want to get that surface area up, get a little more mass on him. Maybe Ridley Gregg can share some of his protein shakes that he was famous for carrying around when he was trying to get the weight up. But one thing Leevi Merilainen doesn't have to worry about is that this is an organization that has shown they have faith and value him, because they had a 3-headed monster in Belleville with Sogard, Merilainen, and Mando, the odd guy out, and they kind of nod to Merilainen, hey, this is going to be a big year for you. And probably not the season Merilainen had wanted. 10-9-1 record with Belleville last year, 287, 906. So not bad numbers for your first full season in Belleville, but definitely something he can improve on. He only got the one playoff game at the end there, but showed really well. 931 save percentage in that one, 27 saves on 29 shots against the Cleveland Monsters. But I've got a lot of faith in Leevi Merilainen. I think right now he's dealing with a groin injury, so we'll see how that goes, and hopefully he's ready when the season starts here. But a third-round goalie being ranked this high, pretty interesting.
I think it's super interesting, and he also, in his stint with the Allen Americans in the ECHL, just showed I have no business being in this league. 926, I believe, save percentage, and he was awesome down there. So I think this will be great, too, because this is the first year where Levy's been stable. And he's like, I'm going to be here at least for the next year, probably 2 or 3, because he obviously came over after being drafted out of Finland Junior, came over and played in the OHL, then went back to Finland, then went here and had that up and down season. So I think for him, knowing where he's going to be and going forward within the organization, I think will be important for him. He was 26 last year on our list, 33 the year before, 29 the year before that, and 44 right after he was picked early in the third round in 2020. So he's one of the 17 players on this list who's been ranked every single year. And I think we've kind of found our median for him, where it's kind of in the late 20s, early 30s, and he can really help himself next year with a good season in Belleville, where I hope he plays upwards of 30, 32 games, helping out Sogard with a two-headed tandem there.
Yeah, and I think that's very reasonable. So Merilainen, big season coming up, and he's a guy throughout his whole career, breakaways, penalty shots, shootouts, one-on-one, he dominates. So that's a shootout specialist goalie is always nice to have.
He's going into a contract year, 1 year left at $820,000. All right, at the top of this prospect here, we have a couple left, but at the top of this tier, one more away. We got first 31. It's Jorian Donovan, who I should have just continued on by that, saying the most improved prospect in the Senators pipeline. You could argue Andonovski.
I was going to say,
what Jorian Donovan did, man, the offensive numbers, he put up 13 goals in 66 games, had a phenomenal playoff, won the Memorial Cup, played World Juniors. Like what he did to elevate himself from 5th round pick to legit prospect, I think is a year ahead of what Andonovski did. Maybe Ando does that this year, but he's 31 on our list, was 39 the year before, and 46 2 years ago. Pilsy, he is showing that he could be that kind of all-around steady defenseman, but that has some pop in the offensive zone.
Yeah, definitely. He had a huge year and is well-deserved of the rise in our value ranking, something I'm sure he covets, knowing that he bumped up 15, or no, not 15 spots. 5 spots. But with Donovan, like, look at the fact that the Saginaw Spirit targeted him as a guy to bring in for their Mem Cup run, right? Like that's in junior, when you have a chance at the Mem Cup, you got to push all your chips in. You got to identify the right guys that are going to get you there. They do that with Donovan and they win the Mem Cup. So absolutely huge. And like you mentioned, he's figured it out defensively, offensively. He's got a bit of grit to his game as well. So I'm so excited about the season Jorian Donovan's going to have.
I don't know if any other people around hockey like winners, but here on Locked On Senators, we like winners. And he's got a Memorial Cup title and an OHL title that he won back with the Hamilton Bulldogs under Steve Stais and Michael Andlauer's regime. So he's kind of got a bit of the old regime in him, being the son of Sean Donovan, being drafted by Pierre Dorion, but then obviously he has connections with the new regime as well. Really excited to see how he transitions into pro hockey. He will start his entry-level contract. He's got 3 years at $797,000. Here's a guy who has made the jump from 7th round pick to number 30 on our organizational value rankings. It's Maxence Guenette. I think when you look at Guenette's game and the improvements all around, he took a step back in the points per game total this year. He had 40 last year, down to 34. Now he played more games, sure.
Yeah.
But I think what you're seeing is a more well-rounded defender, and I'm excited to see him. He's a guy where Stais always mentions him. Dorion did too, as this dark horse right shot defenseman, where if it can all come together, he's already gotten a little taste of NHL games. I think he could be a call-up option this year.
Yeah, and Gannett's another guy, Ross, that I feel like Sens fans kind of gloss over and forget. But like you mentioned, 2 years ago, he had 40 points as a defenseman in the AHL, and 34 points in 58 games is not bad at all either. That got him deservedly a call-up 7 games in Ottawa. And you're looking at a right shot defenseman that can bring some offense to his game here, and the value at finding someone that you drafted in the 7th round, 187th overall, that's already providing NHL games and is a very effective AHL player. That's the diamond in the rough type picks you're looking to make in the 7th round. So Gannett is a very exciting prospect.
Last year, Gannett was 37th on our OVRs. The year before, he was 44. He was 44 in 2021 as well, and 43 in 2020. So that's kind of cool that we can see this extended progression, because it was, 2019 pick, and then he stays kind of stable. And now the last 2 years, really making his move up the charts. And this year he was named to the AHL All-Star game. Unfortunately, an injury didn't allow him to participate in San Jose. But Max Gannett with, I think, an opportunity here to make the jump. Now, when we look at what's next for Gannett, what do you think the most important thing is for him to work on this upcoming season?
I mean, he's got the offense figured out, so I definitely don't think that's an issue. I would say, Ross, you probably want to see him be a little bit more physical. I mean, he's got the frame for it. 6'3", 196 pounds is what I've got him at. Oh, is this the dimensions from what the Sens put out? So
he shrunk
a little smaller than that, I guess. Interesting difference there, 6'1", 181. But either way, I want to see him play a little bit more of a physical game. He's got a taste of the NHL with 8 total games. He knows what he's going to have to do to play up against men and the best in the league, in the world, I should say. So I think the physicality might be something that he's going to have to improve on.
And he just signed a 1-year extension at $775,000. We're looking forward to seeing what Max Gannett has in store this upcoming season. All right, another great segment of organizational value rankings. I'm so excited that we get to do this each and every year. We never take it for granted that we have this opportunity to connect with so many great Ottawa Senators fans. And Pilsy, I look forward to continuing the OVRs. All right, we're back to our organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 29, it's the Hammer. Wadouche. Travis Hamonic comes in at number 29, 34 years old, Pilsy. And I think that when he came to Ottawa, there was already a sense that they paid too much. He was over the hill. He was a defensive liability. I think we certainly saw that last year. I think we were on the side, and his stats show he had 21 points 2 years ago. He's not a perfect player, but he was adequate. Last year, he was not. And I think injuries and age played a role, but where are you at with Travis Hamonic?
Yeah, I think it's a weird guy to place in our organizational value rankings, Ross, because I feel like some people kind of expected us to give him the Zaitsev treatment, where we put Zaitsev dead last because of his contract. He wasn't up to snuff to play, all those kinds of things. The Hamonic contract is really not that big of a deal. People that go crazy over it, I think, just need to settle down a little bit. It's only $1.1 million now. Would you rather have that cap space? Of course, but this is still
a league minimum is $400,000 less.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a huge deal, but certainly this is a guy that playing all 82 games is past him. I think he's someone that should be a 7th defenseman, plug and play, maybe gets 30 games or something like that if injuries happen. But it is good to have a veteran guy in the room, especially last year. Like, it was Hamonic and Giroux and Forsberg were the only players in their 30s once Tarasenko left. So there wasn't a lot of that. And I don't know. I think where we have him is appropriate, Ross, especially when you look at our past rankings. He was 30th and 28th, so he's just right in this range. I'm not sure what this year's going to look like for Travis Hamonic, to be honest.
I'm not sure what it will either. We know that he's got a very decorated resume, if I can even push it that
experienced, far. I would say. I don't know if I would say decorated.
No, that's fair. 841 games in the National Hockey League, was a top 4 defenseman for what, a decade it felt like, between the Islanders and Calgary. Yep. But ever since Vancouver, he's taken that step back. But unfortunately, old hockey men think that big right shot defensemen with experience, that means you can play them in your top 4. And I know it's early at training camp. We're recording this September 23rd, but he's been paired with Jake Sanderson. Like, that can't happen. There has to be an understanding that Travis Hamonic is the 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th best option on the blue line for the Ottawa Senators. We've got a player coming up on our rankings who has 4 NHL games of experience, but who I would be much more confident playing right D than Travis Hamonic. That's Nicholas Matinpalo. No spoilers, but at the same time, like, there's just other guys who I think should be getting this opportunity. I almost wish he could be a development coach or an assistant coach. Keep him around the room. He seems, by all accounts, like just an awesome dude. But we need it to translate to a better on-ice performance, or else he's going to be hurting the team, not helping it.
Yeah, exactly. And I will admit, I was a little surprised the Sens decided to hold on to him, but maybe they tried to move him, or, maybe it's just one of those things out of respect. They're like, all right, we'll let you play out your contract here, and then we'll part ways after. And maybe, like you mentioned, there's a job for you outside of hockey.
Well, also interesting here in Winnipeg, a lot of the talk is that they don't have much defensive depth. So could there be something
bring Hammer home?
Bring Hammer home. We always love a good homecoming story, but last year is a -10. That has to improve. Played 48 games, 2 goals, 4 assists. Like, I don't know if we have to beat a dead horse much more. We've just always, I will listen to Travis Hamonic talk forever. He is one of the better interviews on the team. He's very well spoken. He's very engaging. But at this point in his career, I just think there's better options for the Ottawa Senators to be putting out there each and every night. That's Travis Hamonic. He comes in at number 29 on our organizational value rankings. And yeah, for people who are like, why is he this high? I mean, he's played 840 NHL games. There's guys who are just behind who might maybe have more upside now moving forward, but they might also never make the NHL. So it'd be kind of, I think, ridiculous. That's just our rationale. You can disagree with it if you want, but I just had trouble putting guys who are minor leaguers in their career ahead of a guy who hasn't played the minors in over a decade. It just felt kind of weird for me to do. So Hamonic's in at number 29. Coming in at number 28, a guy who played a little bit of AHL last year, and he was a dominant player down there, but in the NHL, he knows his role. At number 28, it's Zack MacEwen. Last year, he was 34th. He's a 6'2", 200, and we've got him listed at 205 right here. The Senators just posted the rosters for training camp, and they have him at 240. So I'm not sure where we're at with Zack MacEwen in terms of being 240 pounds. But he's a right shot, right winger, and he's always going to stand up for his teammates.
Yeah, and despite what analytics will tell you, and a lot of the scouting on players like these guys, Zack MacEwen, you do need guys like this around. I think players on the team respect and appreciate having guys like Zack MacEwen on the team. Is he going to light it up offensively? No, obviously, but it's not like he's got no skills. Like we saw last year, he had a couple nice goals, like that breakaway goal. He went bar down
in Philly
up against his old team. Like that was awesome. And he's a good AHL player. Like in Belleville, he didn't spend a lot of time there, just 10 games, but 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points in 10 games is solid. So if you need to move him up and down, you can do that. Now, again, I think a lot of Sens fans were critical of this contract, a 3-year deal, but at basically league minimum 750, right? So
775. No, it is. You can't pay him less.
Oh, okay. So yeah, at league minimum. Good PEI guy. I think he's someone that is well liked in the locker room as well. So I think 28's a good spot for him. I figure Ross, he'll probably see a similar amount of games like he did last year. He played 30 games last year. I wouldn't be surprised if it's somewhere in that range, as he's a plug and play 4th line guy as well. But I think as a 4th line guy, he fits in nicely. So I think we got Zack MacEwen at a good spot here.
I think that we were a little spoiled growing up, Pilsy, watching the Ottawa Senators with Chris Neil, with Brian McGrath, and they just simply did not lose many fights. Last year, Zack MacEwen didn't win a whole lot of fights.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that kind of change, but I understand that it's the willingness to do it that earns the respect of his teammates. How many fights do you think he got into last year? I got the number right here because I think it'll surprise you how few he got into.
Well, he only played 30 games, so I'm going to say 5.
4.
Okay, yeah, and that's the thing, Ross. When they signed Zack MacEwen, I was like, okay, they're getting a new tough guy, a new fighter. So I went to hockeyfights.com, shout out hockeyfights.com, and I looked at all his fights, and you can go back and review my analysis of him. Not a lot of winning fights in his catalog, which is unfortunate. But I'd rather Zack MacEwen lose a fight than Brady Tkachuk win a fight and break his hand or something, right? So that's what it comes down to.
That's very well said, Pilsy. Yeah, he fought Austin Watson last year.
Nice.
He fought Jake Middleton, former Ottawa 67. He fought Michael Pezzetta with the Montreal Canadiens, and he fought Jonah Gadjevich in that Gong Show game in April against the Florida Panthers. So Zack MacEwen, I think for him, it's just simplify, and don't make mistakes, much like Travis Hamonic, and that's their way that they can help the team. All right, coming in at number 27, it's Stanley Cup champion Nick Cousins making his debut on our organizational value rankings. 31 years old. Yeah, he was a healthy scratch for all but one game in the finals, but still got the experience of going on back-to-back deep playoff runs with the Florida Panthers. 5'11", 192 pounds. What will Nick Cousins bring to the Ottawa Senators?
He's going to be a greasy player that opponents are going to hate. He's going to get under the skin of star players. We've seen that before. And Nick Cousins doesn't win many fights, Ross, because he doesn't allow it to get to a point where he's in a fight. And say what you want about it, but it's the way he operates. He pisses people off, and then when they finally can't handle it anymore and their wires are crossed and they go full rage mode, he just turtles, and that's that. And obviously, that's unwritten code of hockey. It's not exactly going to get you a lot of respect points, but the perfect way to describe Nick Cousins, he's a guy you love to have on your team because you'd hate to play against him. But he's still a guy that can put up some offense. Like 15 points for a fourth liner isn't that bad. And you talk about the Sens not having a lot of veteran guys that have playoff experience. Nick Cousins has been in the playoffs the last 6 years in the NHL. And in those playoff runs with the Vegas Golden Knights, 17 games, 4 games with Nashville, 3 games with Nashville, 21 games with Florida the year before on their way to the finals, and then 12 last year. So he clearly is a guy that NHL coaches are like, when it comes playoff time and we're going to play the same team for 7 games, I want a guy that's going to piss off and get star players off their game. And I think Nick Cousins does a good job of that. I kind of have him as a lock as a fourth line guy, just because I think when the Sens got him, that's the type of player they were looking for. And Belleville, Ontario native, Ross, it's good to have guys like that. He hasn't played in the minors in quite a while either. Like his last time playing in the minors was 2015, 2016. So I think when him and his agent signed a deal with Ottawa, they probably had some sort of agreement that he's going to get to play in the NHL for a good chunk of it.
Last year, he had 7 goals in 69 games. The year before and the one before that, he had 9 goals in each of those seasons. He's been around the league, and he's been in a lot of situations. Pilsy mentioned the playoff games. Well, what speaks to that is being an organization to expect to win. So he's going to bring that mentality to Ottawa. Hopefully, he's the shift disturber evolution of Parker Kelly, and he can really be a guy that impacts the game without necessarily providing as much offense. You're just hoping he doesn't hurt the team with bad penalties, all that sort of thing. It's a very fine line. I don't have to tell him that. He's been doing it for so long. He's already played in 592 NHL games, so he'll hit the 600 milestone this year and hopefully can maybe hit a couple other milestones here if given the right opportunity. But yeah, Nick Cousins is just, you know what you're going to get effort-wise for him, and I think that what you're also getting is an elevation of experience than what you had on that fourth line previously. So Nick Cousins comes in at number 27 on our organizational value rankings. He signed a 1-year contract at $800,000. All right, coming in at number 26, a bit of an interesting placement for him. I'm sure people are wondering, Nicholas Matinpalo at 26, I thought we were on to the NHL guys. Well, this big right shot defenseman at 25 years old, 6'3", 207, was awesome in his first year with Belleville. I thought he should have earned a call-up or two more than he got, but he just got the 4 games. But Pilsy, why is Nicholas Matinpalo as high as he is on our rankings?
So you look at a right shot defenseman. You love that first off the bat. Good size, 6'3", 207 pounds. Good age, 25. So it's not like he's a green hockey player. He's got experience. And Ross, I mentioned to you, like, he certainly has a lot of experience for a 25-year-old. He has 205 games of Liga experience to his name, playing a bunch in Finland. And he's the type of guy where in Belleville, he's a top 4 defenseman. And in Ottawa, he can serviceably play a bottom pair for a handful of games. Like you mentioned, he only got the 4 games in Ottawa, but with how last year's season went, it's kind of surprising he didn't get a little bit more. But something that I always think about with Nicholas Matinpalo, Ross, our good buddy David Foote down in Belleville mentioned that he was really hoping that of the veteran defenseman that the Belleville Sens had last year, that Matinpalo was going to be a guy they brought back. They're able to bring him back on a 1-year deal. And he was a plus 15 on that Belleville team that struggled at times to keep the puck out of the net. So I think this is the exact type of guy you want. He provides depth in the NHL if, God forbid, there's injuries, or if you just want to mix up that bottom pair to give Tyler Kleven someone he's familiar with in Matinpalo. They played in Belleville a bunch. And he's also a guy that if you don't see him coming up and playing NHL games, you're comfortable allowing him to play 67 games in Belleville and be a dominant force in that top 4. So I like Nicholas Matinpalo. I'm kind of surprised he decided to come back to Ottawa, Ross. I thought maybe he would try to either go back to Liga or try to get another deal somewhere else. But obviously he feels comfortable here, and him and his agent wanted to get things going and get another year here. So I think 26 is a good spot for him.
Yeah, he's gonna make $200,000 in US dollars in his minor salary. He signed a 1-year, $775 contract. He's already got 200 games of legal experience. Maybe he really feels like this challenge is worth waiting out. And clearly, by his spot at 26, we believe that he can be a full-time National Hockey League player. All right, coming in at number 25, it's Adam Gaudette. 27 years old, 6'1", 194. He's in his second stint with the Ottawa Senators. But, Pilsy, the numbers are too hard to ignore, leading the American Hockey League last year in goal scoring.
44 goals in 67 games for Adam Gaudette, 71 points total. I mean, everybody knows the offensive talent that Gaudette has, Ross, former Hobey Baker Award winner, but he just hasn't been able to kind of put his full game together. But he had a huge year in the AHL last year, and I think there's probably some familiarity that he likes about coming back to Ottawa. He's already spent some time here, like you mentioned, and this is a guy that could be an absolute game changer in the AHL. Like, he's a top-line player in Belleville, no question about it. And then he's also someone that could get a handful of games in Ottawa and hopefully provide a bit of offense on the bottom 4, especially Ross, shootout specialist. We all remember the Adam Gaudette game when he went back to Vancouver, and maybe during the game he didn't have a lot of success, but when it came to the shootout, he wowed with that winner. So this is a guy, much like Nicholas Matinpalo, you want in your organization to really boost your AHL team, but also be serviceable if there is a need or an injury for him to be called up for a handful of games. I don't think Adam Gaudette is going to play a full season in the NHL on the 4th line this year, but if you want to provide offense, 44 goals is pretty good.
Well, at the time in his career, look, I know he was older, but it's Tyler Ennis vibes, where it's like you can play him in your bottom 6, but you're not expecting him to be a classic crash and bang bottom 6 guy. He'll just add a little bit of element of flash and skill, and 220 NHL games, right? Dash 37, sure. You look at the time in Vancouver where he produced a lot of his offense. Last year, just 2 NHL games, no points. Last time before that he played in the National Hockey League was 2 years earlier with Ottawa when he had 4 goals in 50 games. So
Yep.
I don't know what to expect from him. He scored a goal last night in his preseason debut.
Yep.
And it seems like since he left Ottawa, all he's been doing is scoring goals. So I think that that's why he's 25th on our list. I could see an argument why he should have been at the bottom of this tier, top of the other one. But 44 goals, over a point per game in the AHL, and he's getting paid what? $400K, $450K in AHL salary. The expectation is for him to be a contributing member to this organization, whether it's in Belleville or if he gets a chance to battle for a fourth line role in Ottawa. But kind of funny that Adam Gaudette is back. And of course, that signature moment stands out in many fans' heads. All right, coming in at number 24, it's Jan Jeník. And we stopped here on purpose today because we want to give Jeník his flowers after an outstanding preseason debut. He debuts at number 24 on our organizational value rankings. He's 24 years old, 6'1", 192. And Pilsy, most notably, he needs waivers this year so they could risk losing him for nothing if he doesn't make the team.
Yeah, and that would be disappointing for sure, especially as a 1-for-1 trade with Igor Sokolov, Belleville Senators franchise guy. So if you were just to lose Jeník just from a waiver claim, that would be a tough value transaction for the Ottawa Senators. You don't want to see that, but he played incredible last night. 1 goal, 3 assists. You see him celebrating one of the goals here in this picture from last night. I really like his style, and clearly Steve Staios is the guy that's familiar with him from his time with the Hamilton Bulldogs earlier in his career in the OHL. And to trade him 1-for-1 for Igor Sokolov, I think says a lot about what both Utah and the Ottawa Senators value him at. And I think he's a guy that could definitely play fourth line minutes consistently. Maybe, I don't know about a full season, because the most time he's had in the NHL is 13 games, 2 games with Arizona, 13, 2 games and 5 games. So he hasn't really been given a lot of leash when he is in the NHL, and mostly it's fourth line minutes. But this is a guy that can provide some offense in that bottom 6. So I like his chances to make the NHL team out of camp.
So do I. I think that what he brings too is a little bit of grit in the bottom 6. He was only 37% on faceoffs in the opening night. So we'll see how that continues. But he's always been able to kind of find a way, right? You look, excuse me, I've got the hiccups right now. Jan Jeník, right? But jokes aside, when we get back to what he was as a prospect, and there's a reason he was very highly regarded when he was in Hamilton. He was a 2 points per game player going into the COVID season. And then out of that, got a taste. He had 2 goals in 2 games in the NHL, Pilsy, in the COVID shortened season. Like, there is some offensive upside. This guy's got some pop to his game. We'll just see if he can do it as a continuous, consistent cycle. This is probably we would like to see consistency tier for the Ottawa Senators, right? Like, that's what's either keeping them too low for what's above, or what they have separated is just the quality of skill that they are just born naturally with, why they're ahead of the guys who we've already done. So we're in this sneaky spot, right? It's just over halfway through our organizational value rankings, where guys like Jan Jeník, they could either boost themselves into the top 20 or fall down below 30, depending on how this upcoming season goes.
Yeah, and I think that's why this tier is so interesting, Ross, especially like this is like the preseason tier. You want to see what these guys can do in the preseason. That's going to determine where they start their year. It's going to have huge impacts on these guys' careers. Like, it's honestly that big of a deal for these types of players. So Jan Jeník, I'm stoked about him.
Don't discount how important it is for these guys too. They know where they're at in their career. And when you get traded like that before you've made the NHL, you're like, wow, like the clock's ticking. So I think that you're going to see a very motivated Jan Jeník here wrapping up our organizational value rankings for today. So Jan Jeník comes in at number 24, Adam Gaudette at 25, Nicholas Matinpalo, 26, Nick Cousins, 27, Zack MacEwen, 28, and Travis Hamonic at number 29. But Pilsy, the tier doesn't end there. We'll have more tomorrow.
Yep, organizational value rankings will continue until we get all the way to the number 1 spot.
All right, back to our organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 23, it is Noah Gregor. Pilsy, why is he making his debut at number 23?
He's making his debut because this is his first year as an Ottawa Senator. He was signed as a free agent in the off season. We got him at 23 because it really seemed like this was a guy that they signed to hold down that fourth line center spot. However, we've seen there's going to be some good competition with that, with Jan Jenik having a really good showing. So it's not necessarily locked that Noah Gregor is going to have that spot, but he certainly has the edge when it comes to experience, Ross. 6 seasons, 241 NHL games. Last year with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 63 games, 6 goals, 6 assists, good for 12 points. He did make it into 2 playoff games with the Leafs last year, but most of his career, other than last year, I should say, has been with the San Jose Sharks organization, where in 2021-22, he put up 23 points in 63 games on a Sharks team. So he has been able to put up a little bit more points than he did in Toronto, probably playing higher in the lineup in San Jose, obviously. But this is a guy who seems like he's got a little bit more speed and he's more defensively minded. So this could be a nice fourth line center for the Sens.
And the thing with Noah Gregor is that separating attribute, speed. Now, his finishing ability is at the bottom of the barrel. It just feels like he puts himself in a lot of good situations to score and can't necessarily bury. You read out the stats for last year, and it just feels like that's probably to be expected this year as well. I think what you're just hoping to do is not give up more when he's out on the ice, right? You're hoping that his defensive abilities and being able to catch up at both ends of the ice, using that speed that is high end, no matter where you place him in the league, he's got high end speed. I'm excited to see how he kind of molds this bottom 6 that last year was just too slow, too inconsistent, and just couldn't get on top of pucks. They felt like they were a bit of a turnstile out there. So I'm excited to see if Noah Gregor can add a little bit of juice to that bottom 6. Now, it wasn't an impressive preseason debut for him, but he's 26 years old. First preseason game is not the be all or end all after signing a one-way ticket at $850K. You just want him to be a responsible penalty killer and a guy who you can count on to not give up more than he gives every time he's out on the ice.
Yeah, I think that perfectly sums up what we're expecting from Noah Gregor.
And the thing with Noah Gregor, like, I already feel like we can move on. It's a low maintenance, like a guy we're not going to discuss much all season. Honestly, the less we discuss him probably means he's playing better and better.
Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but if he can be like a Dylan Gambrell, that's probably what you're looking for, right? Like Dylan Gambrell was not an exciting player, but if Gambrell was used on a fourth line, which unfortunately he was higher in the lineup than he should have been, that's the type of player you're looking for here.
Noah Gregor comes in at number 23 on our Locked On Senators organizational value rankings. And now we move on to number 22 on our OVRs. It's Anton Forsberg, 32 years old, coming off a very down season. But, Pilsy, we've seen it before. This guy can stop the puck.
I am very confident, Ross, that we're not going to see a similar season to this. But, I mean, even you look at 30 games played, a 3.21 goals against average, and an 890 save percentage, you're probably thinking, oh, man, this guy lost a lot of games last year. He still had a winning record, like 15, 12, and 0. Obviously, you'd like better numbers and goals against and save percentage, but he's winning more games than he lost last year, which is pretty impressive, actually, when you start thinking about it. But the Anton Forsberg we want is the Anton Forsberg we got in 2021, 2022, the year that led to him signing that 3-year deal where he was a 282 and a 917 save percentage. And I think he can get back to that, Ross. We've talked about it. He did have the double, was it MCL or ACL? MCL, I think, right?
Double MCL, correct.
Yeah, where he tore both his MCLs at the same time. Obviously, that's a serious injury. Now, I'm not suggesting that slowed him down or it didn't look like that hindered him last season, but I think once you get another year removed from an injury like that, that's bound to help you. And I just think now that it's very clear that Ullmark's going to be your starter and Forsberg's going to be your backup. Whereas last year, I think the idea was Korpisalo was going to be the 1A and Forsberg is going to be the 1B, and then Korpisalo didn't work, and then it kind of flipped the other way, and it wasn't clear. I think that's really going to help Forsberg having a more defined role and lightened workload.
And one thing you can never take away from Anton Forsberg is the work ethic. Always first guy out there, always seemingly the first guy at the rink. And you look at the summer, he was in Ottawa for most of it. And I think that really shows his dedication to getting those goals against and save percentage numbers back to the average for his career. There's a reason why he was 16th on our OVRs last year and 11th 2 years ago when he earned that contract that he's now in the final year of at $2.75 million. He made his debut on our organizational value rankings at 37 back in 2021 when he was just a waiver claim. But you looked at the highs of him when he's moving laterally well and he's not allowing rebounds. He is such a sound goalie. Like, he's so in control of everything out there that he gives the team a ton of confidence ahead of him. He just had a few starts to games where the team wasn't ready and he wasn't ready. And all of a sudden it was 3-4-0 and he was getting the hook. I feel like he got pulled in the first period 3 times last year at least. Like, there were a couple games where
so did Corpy.
Yeah, true. So maybe that's a little osmosis. You get him with Ullmark. You know, they've got connections from back when they played junior together.
Swedes.
I think
we tried to do the connection spin zone with Corpy and Forsberg in Cleveland. It didn't work.
We just had to go further back. They knew each other too recently. This is that youthful exuberance, that childish, fun, kindled spirit that we're hoping to have here with Forsberg and Linus Ullmark. But you're right. That win-loss record is outrageous that he won more than he lost.
Ross, I've got a bit of a hot take here.
Go ahead.
Do we want Anton Forsberg playing the home opener? He's 3-0 in home openers.
No.
Isn't he?
Yeah, I think he is, but he's not playing this one. He's not playing this one.
No, you're not even thinking about it?
No, he's not playing this one.
All right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it in my mind.
If he's playing the home opener, I'll be officially worried about Linus Ullmark's health.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be a Sens season if the newly acquired starting goaltender wasn't injured to start the year.
Well, sounds like we need to change up the vibe.
Yeah, true. Yeah, we could go for something different. But look, if they went with Forsberg in the home opener, I would be surprised and disappointed not to see Ullmark, but he's a home opener guy. It's like an opening pitcher in baseball.
It's a hot take, I'll give you that, but I don't like it. Linus Ullmark has to play the home opener, but let's just see a better season from Anton Forsberg. I'm convinced he will have one. I'm looking at over 900 save percentage. Anything above that, gravy. I think he plays 28 games is my guess. Where do you think you're at with Forsberg's workload?
I'll go 30.
Okay, exactly what he had last year. And this year, Forsberg is number 22 on our Locked On Senators organizational value rankings. All right, coming in at number 21, it's JBD. Yeah, you know me. And he had a 72-game NHL sample size this year. 4 goals, 14 points. Pilsy, where are you at with a guy who's bounced around our OVRs and settles here in the top 20s?
Yeah, JBD is an interesting player, as you mentioned, or I think you mentioned that he's been on our list this entire time. In 2020, all the way up at 17. 2021, move up to 15, then 21, then 25, and now he's back at 21. With Jacob Bernard-Docker, Ross, what I'm looking at with him is we always thought he was going to be a partner for Thomas Chabot. Now, that's not totally over, but it's probably less likely. I don't think he has what it takes to be a top 4 defenseman, which is unfortunate, but that happens as young defensemen develop. So it was always, what is JBD going to do to make himself a serviceable NHL defenseman? And last year, Ross, JBD found what he needed, and that is blocking shots. Jacob Bernard-Docker led the Ottawa Senators in block shots with 156 of them. Jacob Chychrun had 2 less, but then you start looking down the list. Jake Sanderson, 139, Artem Zub, 122. So Bernard Docker was really laying it on the line. And I think that got him a lot of credit and a lot of respect in the room. And if he can continue to do that while staying healthy, obviously, if you're blocking 156 shots, your chances of getting injured skyrocket. So if he can keep doing that effectively, I think that's going to carve himself a nice bottom pair role.
He just needs to be more confident transporting the puck. That's the next big step for Jacob Bernard Docker. But you mentioned the shot blocking. Get this. Shots blocked per 60 minutes of ice time. Jacob Bernard Docker is almost identical as Chris Tanev last year.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a good way to put it.
And we talk about him as a guy who was always laying it out. It just felt like he almost did it quietly in a way. And I'm sure the black and blue bruises, there's a tongue twister for you, that aren't so quiet for JBD. But certainly the teammates understand how hard that job is to lay it out physically. JBD also threw a few sneaky big hits last year. That'd be nice if he could continue trending towards that direction. We know that fun stat where he had the most goals from the top right corner of the offensive zone this season. I don't expect that again next season, but I think that you're looking these types of players that take a little bit longer to develop. I think that you're lucky he didn't get claimed last year on waivers. He was able to go find his game and then ultimately play 72 NHL games. And we'll see what he can do this year. He's in the final year of his contract at $805,000. JBD comes in at number 21 on our organizational value rankings. At number 20, it's Angus Crookshank. Angus Crookshank. The photo doesn't want to load for me. I got a real nice one here for you too. But
yeah, let's get Crooker in there.
He's 25 years old, and he's at the point now in his career where it's time to make the NHL. Don't you feel that way? I know he doesn't need waivers. He's got one more year without waivers. But I think that if you're Crooker and you're the competitive guy that he is, he's expecting to make the opening night roster.
Yeah, and that should be his goal. Like you mentioned, he's at that point in his career where that should be his goal. Like JBD, he's been on our organizational value rankings the entire time, going from 45 to 30 to 31 to 29, and now all the way up at 20. And that's because he had a great year last year. 50 games, 24 goals, 22 assists, 46 points. So almost at a point per game pace here. Now, Ross, I feel like we've had this discussion. I'm so conflicted on what Angus Crookshank's path to the NHL will be, because the Ottawa Senators have the depth now where there's not an open spot on that third line anymore, in my opinion, with Perron and Amadio coming in and Ridley Gregg looking like he can obviously be a full-time NHLer. And then if Norris and...
Well, Crooker probably said uncle when Cousins got signed.
Yeah, well, yeah. But here's the thing, and this leads into my debate here. I still don't think Angus Crookshank being a fourth-line NHL player makes a whole lot of sense. I don't think he's able to do what I don't think 7 or 8 minutes is enough time to allow him to do what he's capable to do. And the players he's probably going to be playing with on the fourth line aren't exactly going to complement his game. Now, I'm not saying that Crooker can't adapt and he can't turn into that blue-collar guy, which he refers to himself as a blue-collar guy. Don't get this twisted as me not believing in Crookshank. Actually, it should be the other way. I have so much belief in Crookshank that I believe it wouldn't be proper to have him on a fourth line in the NHL. But then what do you do? Because he's probably not beating out anyone to be on the third line unless there's injuries, which you hope obviously doesn't happen. And then in Belleville, he's a top line player. So he's going to be going from playing, 18, 20 minutes a night in Belleville to playing 6, 7, or 8 in the NHL. So I just have a tough time placing Angus Crookshank on the NHL lineup.
That's fair. Now, he's almost a perfect, and nothing was perfect about his injury. It sucked. It was a long road back, but because of that, even though he's 24, turning 25, he doesn't need waivers. So he is almost the ultimate, hey, start in the minors, but we know that you're capable of playing in the NHL. And when an injury happens in the top 9 then, or wherever, you feel confident with the depth of having him as a potential call-up. Like, the numbers jump out in the AHL. I put the star there. He was an all-star in the American Hockey League last year. 46 points in 50 games, including 24 goals, 60 PIMs. This guy, despite being 5'10", isn't scared of anybody. I just think that he's the kind of guy that you don't want to bet against because he'll make you look foolish.
Yeah, agreed. And he got his opportunity in the NHL, Ross. 13 games. He scored 2 goals, had 1 assist. And you can see the differences in his 2 call-ups, right? Because those were 2 separate call-ups. He got called up at the end of the...
Right when the team was in utter turmoil.
Yeah, right before DJ Smith got fired. He got 1 game with DJ Smith. That was his NHL debut in Las Vegas. And you can see the differences here, Ross, because in that first stint, 10, 11 minutes for the first 2 games, and then down to the fourth line, 8, 5, 8, 9, and 8. Okay, then he gets sent back down, and he struggles a little bit when he gets back to Belleville. But then after that, the next 15, I think he went on is almost like a 15-game point streak in Belleville. He's lighting it up, so he gets called up again. And then you see he gets that third line. Even he had a little bit of a second line time, 13 minutes, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, 10 minutes. So he was getting more of an opportunity there. And I thought that's where he really shined. And we got to see what Angus Crookshank could do. So if it comes to that type of opportunity again, then I think that's a good spot for Crooker to be in.
Nobody's going to work harder than Crooker. Coming in at number 20 on our OVRs, was 29 last year, 31 the year before, 30 in 2021. And yeah, he's one of those 17 guys who's been on our list each and every year. He organizational value ranking started back at number 45 in 2020. So that's our top, 21 through 64, 20 through 64. We have been counting down all the way, and Pilsy, the countdown continues because we've got the top 20, and dare I say that these are the unanimous top 20 most important players in the organization. All right, our organizational value rankings, if you've been following over the past couple of weeks, we count down every player in the organization based on their value to the team. So think if you're playing NHL on a video game, the trade bar. So it takes into account, I almost said height. It doesn't.
If you're the Ottawa Senators, it sure does.
I had Pierre Dorion on the brain, so automatically it went to height. So it takes into account your age, your potential, what you are right now. Like, you have to value a guy who's in the NHL a bit more than a prospect to a certain degree. So we had our debates all summer long. We've made our list, checked it 3 times, twice and then an extra. And now here we are in the top 20, where we have entered tier number 4, number 5, promising young talent. And coming in at number 19 is a player whose trajectory from being drafted 39th overall in 2021 to where he is now is pretty impressive, to say the least. Zack Ostapchuk is number 19 on our organizational value rankings. Pilsy, why?
This is a player that has a lot of tools in his tool bag. Like, he's kind of a great all-around player. He plays good defensively. He's able to chip in offensively, like we saw with his goal in the preseason game winner shorthanded. Not a big deal. And last season with the Belleville Senators, in 69 games, he had 17 goals, 11 assists, good for 28 points. And Zack Ostapchuk has already had a taste of NHL games. He got 7 games last year. No points, unfortunately, but I think that was a good learning experience for him. And I think he's someone that, we've talked about it, he's in the running for that job at fourth line center, even though he's so young and doesn't have as much experience as some of the other guys.
Well, one thing that was so cool, just because you mentioned his NHL experience, remember his mom, Charlene, flew in for it, and there was the story done on that. I think he's had, an upbringing with a single mother, and it just means that much more when she's able to watch her son succeed and get to that top level where he was able to play in the NHL. And Charlene, that's not the only time you're going to see your son play in the NHL. Zack Ostapchuk just has so many translatable tools, like you mentioned, in his box that he can play different roles. I think you could see him in a fourth line center position where other guys who we might talk about later in this show, you want them to be in certain situations to get the most of them. Whereas I think Zack Ostapchuk, the best one word you can use to describe him is adaptable. He can play wing. He can play center. He's 6'3", 205 pounds. He beat the crap out of Matt Rempe in junior. Like, he can fight. He can do everything that a coach wants in a player. I really see him having a long career in the NHL just based on his adaptability. And it shows in his rise up of our organizational value rankings. It's our 5th year doing it. He's been in 4 of them. He went from 31 to 23 to 22 to 19. That's what you want to see for a 2nd round pick. And 2 years left on his deal. I think I'm confident in saying by the end of these 2 years, he'll be an NHLer full time.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement for sure. It might even happen this year, Ross. So we'll see. But certainly, we're both big Zack Stapchuk fans.
What do you think the best route is for him this year? Because we talk about how he's in the mix for a spot, but we talk about how he can play 4th line center. But is that preferred? Do you prefer him to play 4th line center in the NHL if he's just getting by, or would you rather him be in the middle 6 in Belleville, maybe getting some more offensive touches on the puck?
Zack Stapchuk for me is a little bit different than Crooker. I know I've took my stance on Crooker in the NHL, but for me,
similar to Stephen Halliday, I think as well.
Who, a Stapchuk or a Crooker?
No, with Crooker, like those 2 guys, I don't think you want them in a 4th line NHL role.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Whereas I think Zack Stapchuk can thrive in a 4th line role, but I really wouldn't be that upset or disappointed if he spends another year in Belleville, Ross. He only has the 1 year there, and I think him being in a top 6 role in Belleville would do his development a lot of good. But at the same time, I'm not necessarily saying that he's not ready or couldn't handle a full season in the NHL as a 4th line center. So it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out for him.
Well, time will tell. As we're recording here on September 26th, he's still certainly in the mix to be in that 4th line center position. All right, coming in at number 18 on our organizational value rankings, an even more steep riser. It's Stephen Halliday, 22 years old, was a late draft pick, not in his year, but the year after, 6'3", 214 pounds, and my goodness, this guy can dish the puck.
Yeah, I've learned that Stephen Halliday is a disher. In last year with Ohio State, in 38 games, he had 10 goals and 26 dishes for 36 points. But obviously that's impressive, almost a point per game at the college level. That's sweet. But I think more impressive, Ross, was his transition to the AHL. In 10 regular season games with Belleville, he had 5 assists, disher. And then in the playoffs is where he shined, though. In 7 games, 2 goals, 7 assists. I was at a bunch of those games live in Belleville, and I would say arguably he was the Belleville Senators' best forward, if not best player in those playoffs. So Stephen Halliday has a lot of expectations long-term. I would say maybe not this year, but I think this is a guy that we're going to see the Ottawa Senators are really going to take a shine to as he plays more and more.
We've come a long way since we called him Stefan the first time we talked about him after he was selected in the 4th round of the 2022 NHL draft. And now, I mean, hey, Steven, let's go from 47 on our OVRs right after that draft up to 27 last year. And now he's up to 18 and rising fast. At the time of this recording, he's played in 1 preseason game, 2 dishes in that one. So,
yep.
This guy just finds ways onto the score sheet every single night. He's probably got one of the highest hockey IQs in the organization. This guy just thinks the game at such an elite level that it makes up for maybe a bit of a lack of foot speed. But you just see so many reasons to believe that he'll succeed at the next level. And if you counted him out, you probably counted him out from the transition to the AHL. So if you've been wrong that time, well, shame on you if you're wrong again.
Yeah, and Stephen Halliday was one of those guys that when the Senators drafted him, the online scouting community really applauded it and seemed to think that there was a lot of value at his draft position, which was
101?
104 in the 4th round in 2022. So this is the type of guy you're hoping to get in the 4th round.
Isn't he like one of the most all-time leading scorers in USHL history? He's 12th, if I'm not mistaken, but played a lot less games than some of the other guys.
I think the stat you're looking for, Russ, I think he's the Dubuque Fighting Saints all-time leader.
Well, it's not bad to be 12th all time in points in the AHL as well. A guy named Kyle Connor, USHL. What did I say?
AHL.
Oh,
He's
nice.
not quite there. He's good in the AHL, Ross, but not quite there.
Maybe this year could be the year for Stephen Halliday. He's like the player to watch in Belleville for me this year. I think a full season down there. And the last thing I know, we've kind of, beaten the dead horse a little bit with this statement, but it bears repeating once again. When Dave Bell told us that other veteran AHL players are coming into his office and saying, "Can I play with Steven?" That's the best endorsement that you can get as a young hockey player, is that guys want to be on your line. Stephen Halliday comes in at number 18 on our organizational value rankings. Coming in at number 17 in between the pipes, it's Mads Søgaard, 23 years old, 6'7", 198 pounds. Pilsy, he finally makes a move off number 19 on our list.
Yes, yeah. Mads Søgaard was 19th on our organizational value rankings 2021, 2022, and 2023. He started at 35, so a good jump for him. In 32 games with the Belleville Senators last year, he had an 18-9-3 record, a 245 goals against, and a 916 save percentage. Ross, what I like most about his playing time last year with the Belleville Senators was he was great in the playoffs. Now, not as good numbers in the regular season, 246 and a 910, but he was really the backbone of that team, and he kept them in a lot of games.
Yes, he did. And it sucks that the injury forced him to be unavailable for the final game of the playoffs. I think Leevi did a great job filling in, but that was his net, and it is again this year. He signed a 2-year contract extension this summer, where the second year is a one-way contract. So they're banking basically on him replacing Anton Forsberg after this upcoming season. And I think you're looking at a big year where he's going to have more help than he's ever had in front of him. I think he has to be a 920 or better goalie. Like, I know that's a very high bar. I really think that he can do it. And I know that the NHL stints have not gone well for Mads Søgaard. I think he'd be the first to admit it. But the worst thing that you could do is give up on him early.
Yeah.
Ben Bishop is way too fresh in my memory as a guy who came to Ottawa at 24, only played a handful of games when they were in trouble because Leonard and Anderson, there were some injuries. He gets called in, and then they move on from him. He goes to Stanley Cup Finals 2 years later with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I think especially, like, we talk about how big players take longer to develop because they're growing into their bodies and all that. I mean, a goalie in itself takes longer to develop, and then you add on top that he's 6'7". I think you have to at least give him these 2 years. Now, next year, you're paying him NHL salary in the AHL. I don't know if he needs waivers after next year. That's why this is a huge year for him with this organization.
And Ross, especially with goalies, sometimes it just takes longer. Like, look at Jacob Markstrom as an example, 6'6" goalie, drafted very high in the draft, 31st overall by the Panthers in 2008. And he didn't really become a prime starting goalie until very late in his career. And look how he's playing now. So sometimes it just takes a little while for goalies to kind of enter their prime in the NHL.
Humongous year. Let me say it again. There's maybe no player under more pressure to have a huge year for Belleville than Mads Søgaard. He needs to be a leader on that team. I expect him to play 40-plus games and really be dialed in so that he's ready to make the jump for 2025-26. All right, coming in at number 16, it's the K-Train. Choo-choo! Tyler Kleven coming in. Highest he's ever been on this list. He was 18 last year, and then 22 in 2022, 22 in 21, and 33 after being drafted in the second round of the 2020 NHL draft. He's, you guessed it, 22 years old, 6'4", 200 pounds, and I think we're going to hopefully see a huge step forward next year.
And I think the biggest endorsement for Tyler Kleven, Ross, is
Pierre Dorion saying if he could adopt the son, it would be him.
Sure, that's a big one. And Pierre stating very boldly that Tyler Kleven is an untouchable and will not be a part of a Jacob Chychrun trade.
So is Matt Sogard. He mentioned both those guys.
Yep, rightfully so. But Tyler Kleven in 53 games last year with the Belleville Senators had 5 goals, 16 assists. He was a plus 14. Oh, yes, where I was going with that is the biggest endorsement for Kleven is I think a lot of us thought the Ottawa Senators were going to try to find a veteran left shot defenseman that they could bring in on a PTO or a minimum contract just to have a little safety net there. But they didn't really do that. We talked about Jeremy Davies being brought in, but he's not really that veteran guy. I still consider him an option for the third pair left shot side, but I think they really see Tyler Kleven as being ready, and they want to give him a full opportunity in the NHL this year. It's his job to lose, essentially, is what I'm saying.
But that being said, I'm like how I am with Ostapchuk. Although Ostapchuk is 1 year younger than Kleven, 1 more year isn't the worst thing in the world in the AHL. Playing top pair, whether it's with Martin Palo or someone else down there. Like he went to school for 3 years. So even though he's older, that was still his rookie season in the AHL. I know he got the tryout at the end of the year type thing, burned the year off with the Sens 2 seasons ago, but like he doesn't need waivers. You're able to call him up and bring him down. I just don't think it's the end of the world if he doesn't make this team this year. Next year, I'll be singing a different tune. He's going into a contract year.
Yeah.
I think that it's all in his court. If he makes the team, it's all on him. But if he doesn't, I don't think it's time to move on. I think next year would be the final opportunity. It's like, we need you to crack the roster. You're 23. Like, let's go. But this year, I think is kind of the grace period where it's like, it's yours if you can handle it. But if not, let's get you so that next year, it's no doubt, not even a question that you're ready to go.
I think for me, though, Ross, where I view Kleven differently, and you might disagree with this, but I really see Tyler Kleven as being a great third pair NHL defenseman. Not to say that he couldn't play top 4, but I don't really see that as the prime spot to have him. So in my mind, you want him to be that shutdown physical third pair defenseman. And that's where I think he should stay for at least the next upcoming years or to start his NHL career. Why not let him get all the time possible developing in that role and learning from other NHL players and getting that experience?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. No, I'd love to see Tyler Kleven make this team. I'm just trying to temper the expectations a little bit for now. But I love what Tyler Kleven brings. There's a reason why he's number 16. Like that, there's 18 skaters on an NHL lineup at any given time. And if he's at 16, that's a real good spot to be on our organizational value rankings that will continue tomorrow as we have finished this young promising talent tier. And if you want to see all the tiers and everything we've done so far, it's in the description below. And coming in at number 15 is Amadio. Michael Amadio, one of the best nicknames on the team. They call him Ammo. And this guy is going to be a jack of all trades, and he's going to be playing in a number of different roles this season.
Yeah, Michael Amadio was brought in as the Swiss Army knife player of the Ottawa Senators, and I believe every team should have one of these guys, and it provides so much value, and the Vegas Golden Knights, they found out exactly the way to use him, which is anywhere and everywhere you need, and that's why Michael Amadio got a 3-year deal for $2.6 million in free agency. I'm sure there was other teams going after him, and the Sens probably had to tack on a couple $100K and maybe an extra 3rd year to seal the deal here, because playoff teams know how valuable guys like these are. Heck, even teams that aren't like for sure contenders, you need guys like this in the regular season when injuries happen, or if chemistry is just not quite the same, or you can't have your top line stacked with all your best players. You got to spread the wealth to make things a little bit more even and get some chemistry going. That's why you have guys like Michael Amadio. The Senators thought they had a guy like that in Matthew Joseph, but it didn't work out that way. So they said, we got to get someone that can do this role properly. And Michael Amadio is a guy that has proven he can do it properly. Back-to-back seasons with 27 points last year in 73 games, 14 goals, 13 assists. Now, maybe that doesn't pop out at you, stats wise, but I think he's the type of guy where he doesn't necessarily need to be putting up consistent offense to be an effective player.
He's 6'1", 205 pounds. And what I'd say, he's not like a beast or anything else like that. But compared to Matthew Joseph, who financially he's replacing almost identical contracts, actually 300,000 less for Amadio, he's heavier. He's going to be heavier on the puck. And I think that breeds more consistency in the offensive zone. Joseph, awesome off the rush. No doubt about that. He can fly. He's faster than Amadio. But I think that in zone play, both in the offensive and the defensive end, you're going to see a tangible improvement having Amadio there. And you got to think a guy like this is still at the peak of his career for at least the 3 years on his contract. And in free agency, how many times do you see term overpaid? So for them to be able to get this guy for his 28, 29, and 30-year-old seasons at a reasonable cap hit, I think is a very tidy piece of work. We'll see where he fits in best. I think from what I've gathered so far, maybe starts with Pinto on the third line. I think that could be a nice little 1-2 punch, but you'd want probably a bit of a skill guy on the left side of that, a guy who can maybe have that quick offensive instinct, and we'll see what happens next for the Michael Amadio storyline. But I think the less we hear about him all season, the better, right? He's going to be one of those just work bucket kind of guys who just goes about his business, never too high, never too low. But maybe I'm speaking out of turn because he did have 5 goals and 10 points during the Vegas Stanley Cup run in 2013.
Yeah, that's the thing. He finds ways to be useful. Ross, my first kind of mock lineups, I actually prefer Amadio being on the left wing with Norris and Batherson. That way Perron can be I hope can be a really good third line player and provide some veteran leadership to, like, let's say a Greg Pinto Perron line. I think that would make a really good third line. And Michael Amadio then
where's Pinto then?
In the middle. Greg Pinto. You read lines left wing, center, right wing, Ross. We learned this.
No, we didn't. Over this. Well, I got final thoughts on today's show.
Okay. I hope it includes the poll we put up. But I would love to see a second line of Amadio, Norris, Batherson. That way Amadio can be the guy that's getting them the puck. And then on the third line, you have hopefully can provide some offense to that bottom six with Perron being down there. So I'm excited about Michael Amadio coming in, returning to Ottawa, I should say. Second stint.
Question. More, same, or less than 14 goals for Michael Amadio this year?
You know what? Positive Pillsy, 15 goals for Michael Amadio this year.
And 14 assists?
12 assists. Got to keep him at 27 points.
Yeah, I would be content because Amadio is not the type of player we're going to be looking for points. We're going to be looking for a beyond 50-50 shifts, right? Give me a 60-40 shifts for Michael Amadio where you're in control of the puck a little bit more. I think that's going to be great news. So Michael Amadio, he's come a long way from his brief stint with the Ottawa Senators during the COVID-shortened season. So I don't want people to think back to that version of Michael Amadio that could barely crack a fourth line on that Ottawa Senators team. And just know that he's coming here with a Stanley Cup ring and a whole lot more experience. So Michael Amadio comes in at number 15. Good Sault Ste. Marie boy at the Ottawa Senators, signed for 3 years at $2.6 million. All right, that leads us to number 14, Nick Jensen. The master of none, you could say, but a guy who's going to be very competitive, very sturdy, and very steady defensively if things go well. He's 6'1", 205 pounds. He's 34 years old, and he's signed for 2 more years, this year and next, at $4.05 million.
Nick Jensen is a very interesting player, obviously coming over in the Jacob Chychrun trade. Different player than Chychrun, a right-hand shot and much more veteran experience, and that's what the Ottawa Senators needed. Ross, I will admit, I've been concerned about Nick Jensen. I feel like everyone is just speaking into existence what they want him to be, and I'm not exactly sure that's what he can be, but realistically, he just needs to be the 4th best defenseman on this team, and I don't want to say that's a low bar, but it's not a high bar either, right? Like when Chychrun was brought in, there was a high bar for him, whereas Jensen basically needs to be a steady defense partner, most likely, in my opinion, for Thomas Chabot. I think they're going to keep Sanders and Zub together. So I'm hoping that at 34 years old, he's still got a bit of that juice left and he can be a good partner for Thomas Chabot.
Much like Amadio, the less we hear about Nick Jensen this season, the
Definitely.
better.
Yes.
Like he is just going to hopefully, and this is all me being positive and trying to find the silver lining. And last year was probably his worst season in a while. Like they're buying low on Nick Jensen, but they believe that him being in a partnership with Thomas Chabot or Jake Sanderson, whatever it ends up shaking out being, it looks like it's going to start with Chabot as of September 27th when we're recording this. But you just look at the confidence. I watched his full availability yesterday, and he just brings that, like, nothing's going to phase him. He's been around the league for so long. And I just think defensively, they were giving up so much with number 6 on the ice last year. So much. And it was so unnecessary at times where he was just on the wrong side of the ice. That's not going to happen with Nick Jensen. It feels like he's going to be positionally sound. It's just going to be about limiting mistakes. And one other thing that I think is very worthwhile pointing out about Nick Jensen, and it shows last year, but it goes beyond that in his entire career, he doesn't take penalties. He never puts his team down. Last year, he had 5 minor penalties. The year before that, he had 9 minor penalties. He's never had more than 28 penalty minutes in a full season in his entire career. Chychrun was at what last year? He had so many unnecessary penalties last year.
Chychrun had more puck over the glass pims than Nick Jensen had total.
Chychrun had 60 penalty minutes last year. You can add up all 4. Wait, you can actually add up all. Oh my goodness. How many years can I go back? You can go with the full year before COVID, and he's at 70. Like, this is a player that's going
a good point, Ross.
It's 50-50 play when he's on the ice, and that's a win for the Senators for Nick Jensen.
You know what? I had really overlooked that. I like that point, Ross, because that's a big thing too, is if you're playing smart, simple hockey, you're not going to get in positions where you find yourself out of position and you need to trip, hook, or you're
puck over the glass.
Yeah, or you're panicked and you just flip the puck out of play. Like,
my lasting memory of Chychrun is his face when he's looking at the official, like, did I again?
Yeah, well, mine's a similar one. I can't even believe it. The producers at TSN, they had such an easy job. Okay, Sens get scored on, show the player who scored celebrating the goal, and that other camera 3, is already on Chychrun's devastated face. And it was just rinse, repeat. Every single goal against on the Ottawa Senators, that was the process the producer or the director at TSN went through.
I've got the stat right now. So last year in 82 games, Chychrun had 60 PIMs. Nick Jensen has 63 PIMs in his last 284 games.
Wow.
So Nick Jensen, certainly, I think an improvement defensively on Chychrun. Obviously, he's going to give back a lot of what Chychrun put up offensively. So to have one more fun with numbers moment, Chychrun had 41 points, flip it, and you get Nick Jensen's 14. So certainly the offense isn't going to be there the same way, but you got to think if Thomas Chabot has a more reliable partner, it opens him up to be able to have more production in the offensive zone. That storyline, the Jensen versus Chychrun and how they overall play this year is going to be fascinating to watch. But Nick Jensen at 34 years old comes in at number 14 on our organizational value rankings. They will continue next week as we continue to get up to the top tier, which is getting more and more contentious by the day with the way that certain players have elevated their performance over the last number of years. I can't wait to find the conversations and the discourse that will come of the top 2 tiers. And one of the players that will be helping out the Ottawa Senators comes in at number 13 on our organizational value rankings. It's David Perron, from public enemy number 1 in the nation's capital to now one of the veteran players that has been brought in to help stabilize this group.
Yeah, David Perron has been brought in by the Ottawa Senators because they know that they needed some more veterans in the forward lineup, especially Claude Giroux, kind of the only guy. And with Tarasenko leaving, they needed not only a veteran replacement, but someone that can put up some points too. And David Perron's been pretty consistent last year in 76 games, 17 goals, 30 assists, 47 points. Ross, kind of funny. He played 76 games. Wonder where those other 6 games went.
Funny enough, wait till you see the other guy we're doing today.
Yeah, seriously, that's where those games went. But
let's get ahead of it. I don't want to cross check the line on it.
That's all water under the fridge now, as David Perron is now in Ottawa. Yeah, water under the fridge. Little Rickyism there. As Perron is now an Ottawa Senator, so Ross loves this guy.
No, I've warmed up to him. I just love the way. Well, I'll tell you what I love about him. He protects the puck extremely well in the offensive zone. And I think that he could even work as a mentor for Drake Batherson, who I think has the ability to be this type of puck possession type player and extend offensive zone time. He doesn't give up a lot defensively either. Like I think he's a two-way-ish forward. The -12 does stand out a little bit from Detroit last year. But when you're seeing such consistent production over the course of an entire career, I would give the guy a benefit of the doubt. Over 1,000 games played in the National Hockey League. He's just a guy who brings it. He's a gamer. And these competitive type people, as much as they are players, are going to impact the locker room. So he's 36 years old, signed that 2-year contract for $4 million per season against the cap. So with that comes expectations. You can get a guy for $1.5 million to be a veteran presence, whatever. He's being paid to produce. And I think the expectation should be 50 points for David Perron next year.
Well, Ross, that's probably a good spot to set the over-under for points, because in his last 7 seasons, he's had at least 45 or more points. So he's able to be right around that mark consistently. I think he's going to get a big opportunity with this team. We'll see whether he's playing on the second line or third line, but it's pretty clear he's going to be on the second power play unit. As you mentioned, he's a guy that could be a shooter on that unit, so that should help his point production as well. And look, say what you want. Obviously, in hindsight, that whole Zub Larkin debacle is not great, but I said it, even at the time when it happened, Ross, you want a guy on your team that if he sees his captain down on the ice, he's shooting first, asking questions later. So yeah. I'm okay with that.
No, and people can go back and listen. I remember you did say that the day that it happened. Yeah. And he's the type of guy that's going to go and I said 1,000 games, make it 1,100. Like, this guy has been around and seen the highs and lows. He's been on bad teams. He's been on amazing teams like the 2019 St. Louis Blues, who were actually both. They were last place at Christmas, and then they won the Stanley Cup. So he's just going to be a stabilizer both on the ice and in the locker room. Looking forward to what David Perron will bring, who makes his debut on our Locked On Senators organizational value rankings at number 13. All right, coming in at number 12, it's Artem Zub. He's 6'2", 203 pound, 29 years old. Feels like just yesterday, this mythical creature from Ska in Russia was signing a 1-year entry-level contract with the Ottawa Senators. He turned that into a 2-year contract, and then he turned that into a 4-year extension worth an annual average of $4.6 million. He played on that deal last year, so there's 3 years left on it. 25 points in 69 games, plus 5 with 32 PIMs. I just think that every team needs an Artem Zub.
And the Ottawa Senators especially need an Artem Zub. And guess what? They've got one. Thank goodness. Artem Zub has been a very consistent player throughout his time in Ottawa. And Ross, we were talking, he's been here since 2020. So he's seen some rough times in Ottawa. However, never been a minus player in plus minus. +4, +1, got close, +2, +5, but never a minus player on some terrible defensive teams is a testament to how good Artem Zub is defensively.
And how consistent he is. Now, we're starting to see a little offense trickle into his game, which for people that are watching this in St. Petersburg, Russia, you're not surprised. This guy was a top offensive producing defenseman in the KHL at 23, 24 years old, scoring double-digit goals, all that. But for him to be able to add a little bit, like if he could get 30-plus points, he was on pace to beat that by a mile last year. I think that this is just an extremely valuable player that you want out on the ice when the games are tight at the end of it. So I'm ecstatic that Artem Zub is here for at least 3 more years. He should be a Senator for life. I don't even think that's hyperbole. I think that every team needs a guy like this, and for Ottawa to have their own is pretty cool. And how he's been able to get into a consistent rhythm in our organizational value rankings. When he was a mythical creature, we didn't know anything about him. He was 24th back in 2020, and then he was 11th, 12th, 14th, and now 12th on the list. What would you like to see as a successful season upcoming for Zub?
I mean, honestly, Ross, if he just ran these numbers back, like just get obviously a couple more games played without David Perron on the opposite team, he should be able to do that.
Don't break your jaw.
Yeah. I think, honestly, Ross, the biggest thing for Artem Zub is also how he's been able to create a true number one defense pair with Jake Sanderson. Like, because if Jake Sanderson doesn't find that partner, I'm not saying this is necessarily true. I'm just likening it to a situation. Think about how Thomas Chabot had to deal with his first couple of years in the NHL without a true partner. He had Dylan DeMello for a little bit, but then when DeMello went and gone, it was Zub that was able to bring stability to Chabot as well. So Sanderson being able to have Artem Zub as a partner and giving this team a true number one pairing, and a pairing that can not only shut down opponents' top offensive lines, but also chip in some offense as well between the two of them, is massive for this organization. So we love Artem Zub here on this show.
And we can't talk about Artem Zub without giving a shout out to the Ottawa Senators fans. The fact that this Zub tradition has legitimately taken on a life of his own. He's going into his 5th year, and every time he's ever touched the puck at home, people chant his name. Like, how cool is that?
Like when we were in Minnesota, Ross, people were pretty confused when we were doing the Zub chant.
Like that it's one of the coolest things in the NHL for an unsung type player like Zub to get that much love and appreciation. In Ottawa, we love our stay-at-home defensemen. Chris Phillips, Anton Volchenkov, Mark Method, Mark Borowiecki. The list goes on and on. We love stay-at-home defensemen. And, hey, if you can stay at home but also go get some errands done at the same time offensively, I think that could be great for Zub.
Yeah, exactly. So, honestly, if he can get in the 70s in games played and just add a couple more points here, that's perfectly good for me.
Will this be the year where Artem Zub has his first double-digit plus season?
Ooh. I hope so.
If he plays with Jake Sanderson all year, yes.
Yeah, most likely, yes.
All right. Artem Zub comes in at number 12 on our organizational value rankings. Again, in the comments, we will have the entire list for you. The link to go check it out on our Google Doc. I'm fired up to get into the top 10.
Yeah, the top 10 is always a lot of fun, and we're getting closer to the regular season, so you want to start getting into the big dogs. So yeah, organizational value rankings, love doing this and love getting all the way to the top of the list and seeing how mad people get with the top players.
We were just at the top there of the 4th tier. That is the NHLers tier. Zub is 12, David Perron 13, Nick Jensen 14, and Michael Amadio at number 15. The next tier, it's a 2-person tier we will have tomorrow, and it includes the very exciting young talent tier. So who's in it? Have your guesses in the comments below. All right, now to our organizational value rankings. We are up to the top. Like, we're getting into some serious business now, Pilsy, where we're doing number 11 and number 10 today, and then we're in the top 10. So this is our young talent pool. It's just 2 players long, and coming in at number 11 is Ridley Greig. The progression on this kid has been exactly what you want from a late first rounder. Tears up junior the next year, does well in the World Juniors. Then he makes it impossible on the AHL team not to call him up, gets a little taste, doesn't do a whole lot, but then last year played almost an entire season, 72 games, missed a few with injury in NHL action.
Yeah, Ridley Gregg is turning into a perfect third line player, in my opinion, especially when you consider the fact that he's able to play center or on the left wing. So a little bit of versatility is always good when you're kind of a middle six player. And last season, in 72 games with the Sens, 13 goals, 13 assists, good for 26 points. And Ross, a plus 10 for Ridley Gregg, led the Ottawa Senators last season. Now, obviously, he's not in the mix offensively as much as some of the other top end players, but for him to finish not only a plus, but a plus 10 was pretty impressive in my eyes.
Well, both of his wingers are gone, right? He was on that line with Vladimir Tarasenko and Mathieu Joseph, and they just were so steady through the first portion of the season. And now it's almost like, hey, you're probably going to play the wing, but the Sens often played him at center last year. And it just makes me feel like long-term, they want this guy to be in the middle of the ice. And I think as he gets stronger and better on faceoffs, it might be easier for him to be in the middle. But then it's also a numbers game. You've got Stützle, Norris, Pinto. And I know some people want Norris as a winger because of the injuries. But when Norris is at his best, he's playing in the middle of the ice. There's not much, I don't think, to argue.
Well, we haven't seen much of a sample size otherwise, so it'd be hard to argue the other way.
Exactly. And he's got the speed and all that. Anyways, I love Ridley Gregg as a player, and the versatility is key. But what I want to see him this year is just add another element. Like, he was annoying last year to an extent, but I think now that he's, 185 pounds, this guy was probably 165 at his first camp. So for him to be able to back it up a little bit more, I think we could see a little even greasier. Not to mention, now he's got the rat master, Nick Cousins, along with David Perron, teaching them their tricks. I think that this is a guy who's scratching the surface in what he's going to become. And you can see that with his progression. I mean, we've been high on him for a couple of years now. After being drafted in the end of the first round in 2020, he was 27th on our organizational value rankings. He then moved up to 16, then 10, and now in back-to-back years, he's at number 11. What would you like to see from Ridley Gregg this upcoming season?
I think a little bit more offense, 13 goals, 13 assists, nothing to shake your head about or be disappointed about, but I'd like to see those numbers creep up a little more, maybe past 15 goals and closer to 20 assists, so a little uptick. And Ross, it'll be interesting. You mentioned him getting greasier. Well, he's kind of got a target on his back now. If you're watching YouTube, the picture of him firing in a slap shot empty netter against the Toronto Maple Leafs, that raised a lot of eyebrows around the league. And I don't think he's kind of a undercover greasy player anymore. I think people are aware of him now. So that'll be interesting to see whether he leans into that more or he was a little uncomfortable with all that attention when it happened. So maybe he leans out of that a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Can't wait to see the season Ridley Gregg is going to have, though. He's just one of those exciting pieces that you can move around the puzzle, and it fits in so many different places. So he's going to be a utility player this season, I believe, for the Ottawa Senators. And I think him being at the net front on the second power play unit is going to create an opportunity. My goal for him, I was going to say guess, but it's more of a goal, is 20 goals, 20 assists. Let's get up to 40 points.
Sure.
Especially if he's getting time in the top six. I think that that's a reasonable goal for Ridley Gregg, who comes in at number 11 on our organizational value rankings. All right, number 10. And to be honest, we flipped these after training camp started because Carter Yakimchuk should not be any lower than this. And we honestly argued about putting him up a few spots, but we settled right at number 10 for the now 19-year-old, 6'3", 203-pound defenseman who was an offensive weapon last year in the WHL.
Yeah, 30 goals just in general is impressive, but 30 goals as a defenseman does not happen very often in juniors. So, and in 66 games, 71 points, so above a point per game pace. And then obviously the 30 goals jump out at you, but so do the 120 PIMs. And Ian Mendez, great writer for The Athletic, last year did an article covering all the different penalties that Carter Yakimchuk had, and not very many of them were like lazy stick infractions, like tripping, hooking, those kinds of penalties. It was more when things get out of hand. Carter Yakimchuk took care of business and had some high PIMS nights. So he's the kind of guy where he'll bring it offensively, but he backs it up physically too. And we've seen, or if you haven't, go check out his highlight reel from his time in Calgary in the WHL. This guy loves laying the body, and he can throw open ice hits with the best of them.
Well, him adding that element eventually will be great at the pro level, but right now he's just dipsy doodling. He's acting like,
Dangles.
oh, those junior moves won't work in the NHL. Well, ask Jake McCabe, Mitch Marner about how it looked the other night, because it certainly didn't look like it was any
Austin
different.
Matthews didn't even bother on that play.
No.
He's like, he's gone.
Yakimchuk looked like he was playing the Swift Current Broncos on a Friday night at home. This was unbelievable for him to start his career. But then he looked like he was playing the game in a rocking chair in the second game he played, where he didn't have that highlight reel goal. Instead, he had 2 assists. Okay, so this is a guy who's finding his way onto the score sheet, and he's finding his way into the mix to earn a job here. Now, if you're listening to this right before the season, maybe it's already been decided. We're going to post this all in one long video on the Sunday. But if you're listening to it today, he's about to be on a pair with Jake Sanderson going up against the Montreal Canadiens. So it's clear the organization has taken notice. How couldn't you? That he's having one of the best camps versus expectations that we've had out of the 50-plus players that were invited to camp.
Yeah, I feel like that's fair. Like, I think Carter Yakimchuk wasn't a pick that people were like down on or like really disappointed or anything, but I don't think he didn't get the same shine that the Prex, the Dickinsons,
both been sent down, by the way, already.
Williams, he didn't get that kind of shine, but so I think this is kind of his coming out party to some of the more casual Sens fans or fans that just don't follow the draft as closely. But this is why, like, what he's showing was the high end of potential that the Senators really banked on. And so far, so good.
So far, so great, man. Like, I'm so impressed every time I watch him about the poise. And that's what we're going to be looking for more and more, right? When you have a young defenseman, it's how much is the game going to overwhelm you? There's going to be certain times where he's up against elite competition, those types of things. And he just seems like that easygoing attitude. Remember, we met his grandpa at the draft, and same thing, like smile on his face, just very relaxed, very quiet, but you could tell there's a confidence about them too. So I love what we've seen from Carter Yakimchuk so far, and there's a reason why he's making his debut at number 10 on our organizational value rankings. All right, Pilsy, so top 10. I think everybody can figure out now who it's going to be, but I think the order is going to get a little contentious.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and we still have some contentious thoughts about the order as well.
Oh, yeah, and we'll get to that by the end of the week here on Locked On Senators. We appreciate everybody for making us a part of your daily routine, and a reminder that you can see our full organizational value rankings list on our Google Docs, which the link is in our description below. We get back to our organizational value rankings, and coming in at number 9 is number 9. It's Josh Norris.
Josh Norris, this will be a big year for him as he only played in 50 games last season, but he put up 16 goals, 14 assists for 30 points. Need a little bit more production out of a player making almost $8 million, and he's likely going to be the second line center for this team. A lot of talk about Josh Norris being an X-factor player for the Ottawa Senators, and for a good reason, because if he goes down, we've seen what happens when Shane Pinto has to be elevated in that second line center role. Doesn't exactly meet the standard of what you need if you want to be a successful team as a second line center. So if Josh Norris can stay healthy and I don't think he's going to get right back to 35 plus goals right away, Ross, but I want to see Josh Norris in the high 20s at least here. And for him to do that, I think he's got to play right around 60 games.
It's kind of interesting, though, even though he didn't really produce a whole lot last year, 30 points in 50 games, his 16 goals were still top 5 on the team.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have a whole lot of high-end goal scorers last year, but he still had 16 in 50 games. Do we want that number to be higher for the price tag of $7.95 million per season for the next 6 years each? Yeah, of course you would, especially knowing what this guy can do when his shot is clicking. I think he's scoring 30 this year. I think he's scoring 30 on the dot. I would set the over-under at 29.5, and I'd hammer the over.
Well, Ross, especially now that we see him back in his rightful office on the power play. I mean, like, how many goals do you think he lost because he wasn't there the entire time? Probably at least 5 or 6. Like, he was automatic from there years ago, and let's hope he can get back to that, because that's where he thrives the best. Like, his shot is one of his, if not his best attribute, and they need to be utilizing him properly, especially on the power play.
His other big attribute is his consistency in the faceoff circle, which didn't seem to be any different after the injury. He was 10 for 16 in the preseason game the other night against the Montreal Canadiens. Last year, he was 52%. The year before, he was 58%, albeit in a small sample size. In his career, he's 52%. And for a young centerman, that's pretty impressive. He's 25 years old, 6'1", 198 pounds, left shot centerman. Last year, he was 7th, so he's down 2 spots. The year before, he was number 5. He was 5 in 2021 as well. And he started on our countdown in the COVID season at 9. So we're kind of seeing a bit of a half pipe in a way. Like, he went down and now he's curling back up. So we want to get him to be right in the mix. And I think with a good season, he could easily move up a few spots again. It's just you have to prove it, and he's been out of sight, out of mind for so long, and the shoulder is such a question mark. He really needs to embrace this opportunity that he's getting to be as healthy as he is, and I think we're going to see him being very motivated. And one thing where, especially when you go see him live, he is a sneaky speed demon. This guy can fly through the neutral zone. So I'm hoping that he can help the Sens in transition.
Yeah, I mean, with Josh Norris, it's always been the shoulder injuries that have been the issue, right? So his skating was never really hindered through the multiple injuries he's had. So that's a positive, at least.
With Josh Norris, we're expecting 30 goals. Is that fair to say as a show?
It all depends on the games played, right? Like, if he, honestly, Ross, I think you need to look at the over-under of games played. Like, if he plays over 60, I think he can hit 30. If he plays under 60, I don't think he can hit 30. That's where I would set it at.
All right, Josh Norris coming in at number 9 on our organizational value rankings. All right, coming in at number 8, Shane Pinto has jumped Josh Norris. Shane Pinto comes in at number 8, 2-year contract this summer at $3.75 million per season. Last year, he was at number 10, so he moves up 2 spots.
Yeah, and I think, Ross, a big reason why we have Shane Pinto 1 spot ahead of Josh Norris, it's not hugely ahead, but just barely. I think the contract really helps. I was fighting for that bridge deal all along. They got the bridge deal done. I think it worked for both sides. And if you prorate Shane Pinto's points, he only played 41 games last year. We all know why, where those other 41 games went. But he would have got 54 points. Like, 54 points in 82 games for Shane Pinto would have been nice. So if he can kind of get back to that production, maybe even get a little bit more production, that would be great. A +9. So he really figured out the defensive side of his game a lot better last season, in my opinion.
Well, he wasn't playing with Alex DeBrincat.
Yeah, I mean, that helps. Yeah, exactly. And if you can keep him in that third line role, especially if the way the lines look today, you have Perron and Amadio as his line mates, I think that third line can do a lot of damage. So I'm expecting a big season from Shane Pinto, who obviously missed 41 games, but then played 41 games straight perfectly healthy. So the health issues seem to be behind Shane Pinto, which is a huge sigh of relief.
Well, even last year, right? He played 82 out of 82. So he has not missed a game in 2 seasons due to injury. Of course, there's the suspension. However, it is a good sign that Shane Pinto's ready to go, because when this guy's on his game, he's a horse. Sneaky 6'3", big guy out there, right shot centerman, 200 pounds, and we've always loved his game, right? He was one of the OG Nodak Sens. No disrespect to Brandon Bochenski or Ben Blood or a few of the other guys that came, Christian Wallenius way before them. But when it came to the Nodak Sens and Jake Sanderson, Tyler Clevin, and JBD, Shane Pinto was the guy out of that group, obviously the only forward, but he was the guy who was second in Hobie Baker voting, and he really impressed each and every night. The shot is electric. Like, it's so funny because Josh Norris has the one-timer, But for Pinto, it's the wrist shot. It's the quick release. It's being able to get his shot off in different situations. That snapshot bumper play on the power play, of course, with Giroux is such a unique skill set to have on your power play. Not a lot of teams have that high center shot in their playbook. I think we could easily see Shane Pinto explode for his first 50-point season this year.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, Ross, like if he would have played the full 82 games, he would have finished with 54 points.
Oh, so you're saying 60 we should set it at?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think that's that crazy, especially with bolstered line mates. If he's playing on the third line, he's going to get easier matchups, and he's going to continue to be one of the top shooters on that second power play unit, like that bumper play you referenced. So I don't think it's that crazy that he could hit 60 points if he plays all 82 games.
He was just a smidge above 50% in the dot last year, but it took a whole lot of them. Took over 510 faceoffs last season. He was number 2 on the Senators in plus minus behind Ridley Gregg, third on the team, if we're counting Tarasenko, who was traded at the deadline. But he just brings responsibility, and that's that. And we talk about Norris and Pinto, so we may as well pull out the stat here right now that we have locked and loaded at all times because it is the most peculiar stat in the National Hockey League going. The Sens record all time 24, 11, and 3 when Stützle, Norris, and Pinto play in the same game. Like, that is a big enough sample size over such a long period of time that it's not a coincidence. The Ottawa Senators, when they have those 3 in the lineup, they all bring something different. Timmy's got the dynamic skill. Norris has the shot and the defensive responsibility. And Pinto, I guess similar to Norris in a way, but different. You got a lefty and a righty. You can kind of use them in different matchup situations. It just has to happen more often this season. I need it to happen double what it's happened in the last 4 years combined. Where, what's that? 38 games. Can they play half the season together? Is one of my big questions going into the year.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Ross, because the way this roster is constructed, they need a first-line center in Timmy, a second-line center in Norris, and a third-line center in Pinto to ultimately achieve the success that they want to. Like, that is so crucial to their success. I mean, if Shane Pinto went down, that would obviously be unfortunate, but you could slide Ridley Gregg in there, and I don't think it would be too detrimental, but yeah, Josh Norris is the big hinge for this team's center depth.
What's the official prediction for Shane Pinto, or what you'd like to see from him this upcoming season?
I'll say we already kind of referenced it, so I'll stick to it. Let's try to reach that 60-point mark.
All right, coming in at number 8 this year, it's Shane Pinto. He was 10 last year, 9 the year before, 9 the year before that, and 13th the first time that we did this list back in 2020. All right, coming in at number 7, it's Thomas Chabot. Last year, 51 games, had 31 games missed due to injury. Unfortunate. But when he was in the lineup, I actually thought he was pretty consistent and pretty good.
When he wasn't playing with Jacob Chychrun, it seemed like he was able to find success. Although when I went back and looked at their advanced analytics, it wasn't too bad, but the eye test was just brutal. Thomas Chabot is kind of getting back to his old ways. I mean, it's been a while, 2018, 2019, since he had his career high of 55 points. But now that he's kind of more settled into not being this team's number 1 defenseman and having to play 30 plus minutes every single night, I think it's going to be a big benefit for him. Last season, like you mentioned, only played 51 games, but had 9 goals, 21 assists, good for 30 points. I think, Ross, if he can get back to what he did the year before in 68 games, 11 goals, 30 assists, good for 41 points, like if he can get to the 40-point mark as someone that's not playing top power play and not playing top pair minutes anymore, that would be a success for me for sure. And I think he's a guy that can do it.
He needs to play less. I feel like I'm a broken record at this point over and over again. But my goodness, he's 27 years old and he's played the amount of overall minutes. I know that it's probably not an easy number to put into perspective for people, but he's 27 years old, Pilsy. He's missed a number of games due to injury.
Yep.
And he's played over 10,000 minutes in his NHL career. This guy has been run into the ground over and over, and it did come down to 23:03 last year. I think the sweet spot for Thomas Chabot is about 21 minutes a game.
Yeah, and I mean, now that he's not on that top pairing with Zub, it's more than likely going to be Sanderson and Zub again. I think he is going to be in the low 20s, averaging every night, which is a good spot for him.
And second power play unit last year at the start of the season. He was still on that top power play unit, which I know that we've been kind of hard on him with how he slows the pace down on the man advantage when quick puck movements, how you get the goalie out of position. But he does break the puck out of the zone really well, and he's an easy zone entry machine. So there's a reason why. I mean, look, it's kind of hard because he moved down 2 more spots than he was last year. And he moved down 2 more spots than the year before. And he moved 2 more spots down than the year before. The first 2 years we did this in 2020 and 2021, he was our top guy. Number 1.
Yeah. Yep.
Number 1. But he's still 7. Like, he's still in the mix. Now, 4 years at $8 million per season. That's definitely something where you need production out of that spot. Here's my challenge for Thomas Chabot this season. To be a plus player for the first time in his 9-year career.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to put a lot of the blame on Thomas Chabot for most of his career for being a minus player. He was paired with some questionable defensive partners and put in impossible situations. But now he's got the right supporting cast around him that the defensive side of the game does need to improve.
2 of the last 3 years, he's been -3. I don't think I'm asking for too much. I honestly think he probably should be double digits in the plus if things are going in the right direction, but I'll settle for a +5, +7 this season for Thomas Chabot. And I'd love to see him hit 40 points. Like, he got to 55 that 1 year when he was 22 years old and hasn't even sniffed it since, had 41 2 years ago. So let's get back to at least 40 points. And a part of that is staying healthy. And I think that's going to be important for Thomas Chabot. So I'd like to see him maybe 10 goals, 30 assists type season for Chabot.
Agreed. Yep.
Okay. Thomas Chabot comes in at number 7 on our organizational value rankings that are still in this tier, which is good NHL talent or elite NHL talent. I would say elite. Guys who any team would have in their top 6 or in their top 4 on defense. All right, we've made it to the top 6 in our organizational value rankings. This is where it really heats up. Coming in at number 6, it's the weatherman, Drake Batherson. I mean, my goodness, what a couple seasons for him. After Aaron Dell did one of the dirtiest plays in the season 2 years ago, the fact that Drake Batherson is now coming off back-to-back 82-game seasons, I think that's the biggest eye-opener and what can give Sens fans a lot of confidence in his playing career going forward.
And Ross, there's no longer any sort of lingering effects of that high ankle sprain. I think maybe the year before you could see it a little, and I think even Drake admitted that it was still hanging around, but last year we didn't see that at all. 82 games, 28 goals, 38 assists, good for 66 points. And Ross, Drake Batherson was in the running for the Masters green jacket the year before with -35. He cleaned that up a bunch, going from -35 to -9 last season. So
didn't play with Alex DeBrincat.
Yes, that helps.
Didn't I just say that yesterday with Pinto?
Yeah, he did. But
nice.
It's about time Drake Batherson gets some respect put on his name. Like, this
around the league.
Around the league. Like, he's probably going to score 30 goals this year, Ross. Like, it's very attainable for him to get 30 goals, 40 assists for 70 points. Like, especially if he can get things clicking on the power play with that top power play unit.
Net front guy.
Look out.
Guy now. Hey?
Yeah.
We know he's got the hands. Like, that's to me the number one attribute that Drake Batherson brings. It's hockey IQ and the hands. Dangling Drizzy. I mean, the way that the goal at the start of last season against the Washington Capitals is seared into my head, where he went all around the world, where he dragged it from one side of the crease to the other and put it bar down. Like, this guy can make plays with the puck. The creativity is off the charts. And growing up, he wanted to be like Mark Stone. He put it on his NHL Central scouting thing before the draft. What NHL player do you want to emulate? Mark Stone. To me, him being a plus player this year is a non-negotiable. I think that his defensive game has the potential with his active stick, with his ability to read plays. There's no reason why Drake Batherson can't be a 30-goal plus 10 or better type player this upcoming season. He's going to be in the top 6, whether it's on the Stützle line or the Norris line. That remains to be seen, but he's going to get the opportunity. If he can stay healthy again, there's no reason to doubt why he can't be one of those guys that I think opens a lot of eyes on the national media and even in the States, because he's a fun player to watch that finds his way onto the highlight reel, the type of player that fans are attracted to.
Yeah, Ross, if you can have a 30 goal scorer as the 6th best player in your franchise,
5th in a goalie.
Yeah, true. I'm not expecting Linus Ullmark to get 30, although he was 29 goals away one season. But still, the point remains that like if he's not even in your top 5 players and he's putting up 30 goals a year, you're in good shape.
At under $5 million. You're welcome, Pierre. Under $5 million. 4.975. Keep the change, as Drake would say in that video they did where they went out to Nova Scotia this summer. He's an all-time vibes guy, and I think that this is going to be the year at 26 years old that the former 4th-round pick who was passed over in the draft before is going to really establish himself. You know what? I've talked myself into it. Drake Batherson will be at the NHL All-Star game this year.
Ooh.
That's spicy or what?
That's a spicy take, yeah.
I mean, he was an All-Star 2 seasons ago, but then Aaron Dell said, nope, I don't want you going.
Yeah. Hey, I like it. I think it's a spicy take, but I like it.
Okay, hot take alert. Okay, so 6'3", 205 pounds, right shot, right wing. And this is funny because if you're watching this on Sunday where we've got ranking every player in the Senators organization, you'll notice that guys later on, they tend to move by 20, by 15. The jumps are wild. But Drake Batherson, one of the 17 guys out of 64 who've been on this list the whole time, and he's either been 8 or 6 in every year.
Yeah.
No in between. Not even 7. I think this is a perfect spot for him at number 6, and I'm excited to see what Drake Batherson can do this upcoming season. All right, coming in at number 5, it's the Claude father, the Alfie clone. It's Claude Giroux, 36 years old, 5'11", 187, right shot, right wing, and he's in the final year of his contract, 1 year left at $6.5 million.
And Ross, another player that has played back-to-back 82 games, Claude Giroux and Drake Batherson. So you love to see that. He had 21 goals, 43 assists for 64 points. Now, a minus 14, you don't love to see that for Claude Giroux. And he did have a 15-point dip from last season, most notably 14 less goals. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up this season. I think the first year as a Sen was probably high expectations for Claude, and last season was a little disappointing. I think he kind of meets somewhere in the middle, right around 70 points.
Well, his second half, and that obviously coincided with the Senators playing meaningless games once again. He fell off offensively so much in the last 2 months of the season. Now, albeit April, a shorter month, only 9 games versus 16, 15 in the other months. In his last 25 games, he had 3 goals, Pilsy.
Yeah.
3 goals. So go on pace before that. He was probably back up to 25, 26, 27. I don't think he's going to set a career high like he did 2 years ago with the goal score. What do you have, 37?
Here, I got it here. 35.
35 goals 2 seasons ago, down to 21. I think we split the difference. Why don't we get to his jersey number? 28 goals, I think, is a reasonable expectation for Claude Giroux, especially when Travis Green has locked him onto the line with Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk. Last year, Brady was moved off that line a little bit, and I'm expecting him to be a difference maker each and every night. I don't know if I'm being unreasonable with that as a 36-year-old, but he just has so much Alfie in him, and frig, Alfie was as good later in his career, right? It's not the speed in his game. Like Steve Staios just told us this week, where it's like, these are the types of players you hate playing against because they're so smart that they just know where to be at all times. So I think that Claude Giroux, I'm not going to say scratching the surface or anything, of course, but I do think that he can stay at this level. I don't think there's going to be a dip like you see with some players once they pass that 35-year-old season.
Well, Ross, what we have to talk about with Claude Giroux, and one thing that he consistently contributes towards, you know where I'm going with this, the face-offs. 58% in the face-off dot. Now, maybe some people are like, well, how many face-offs did he take? Is that because he didn't take very many? No, you're way off on that. He took the most face-offs on the team by a wide margin, almost double the next player. He took 1,152 faceoffs and won 58% of them. The next closest player was Josh Norris, actually, with 629. So Claude Giroux still got it when it comes to the faceoff dot.
Josh Norris took the second most faceoffs on this team and missed 32 games.
Yeah, Timmy's the next guy with 512, then Pinto 496, Greg 449. So
I got another fun Claude Giroux stat for you.
Hit me.
Since the year 2010, a span of 14 seasons, only one player in the National Hockey League has more power play points than Claude Giroux.
It's Ovi.
It's Ovechkin. And it's a lot closer than you might think. He's only 7 points ahead of Claude Giroux in power play points.
Wow. Okay.
Stamkos is 2 behind, and Crosby's 15 behind. But of course, Crosby missed a bunch of games with his concussion issues back in the day. So this is a guy where he's elite on the power play, and at even strength, I'd like to see him with Brady a little bit more as well. Like him and Timmy played a lot. He was his most common line mate last year by almost 200 minutes. But he only played 400 minutes with Brady, 730 without. So I think that having those three as a lock trio, all these top teams, they have their top line all set. And I'd like to see that with Claude Giroux this year with the Ottawa Senators. Final thing on Claude, what are your expectations? I said 28 goals. What's it for you?
Yeah, I want to see him hit 70 points. I'm not too concerned with the goal assist ratio, but I'd like to see 70 points. And we got to clean up that plus minus.
Oh, big time. So we were a little hesitant or conservative, will I say, when Claude came in. He was 8th on our organizational value rankings in 2022. Then he jumped up to number 4, and now he settles at number 5. And the reason why? Because coming in at number 4, it's Linus Ullmark, the savior. Is that too much pressure?
Maybe.
Save us.
Yeah.
It's his debut on the list. He's 6'4", and unlike Matt Murray, he's probably got 60 pounds on him. 214 pounds, 31 years old. The only thing that I hesitate on is 40 games played last year. He's going to have to pump that number way up.
But he wants to pump that number up, Ross. That's a big motivation for him because pretty much his entire career, he's always been in a tandem situation, even in Buffalo, right? So I think this is going to be a challenge he happily accepts, and he's gunning to be a number 1 goalie in the NHL. He deserves to be with how he's played last season. As Ross mentioned, 40 games, a 22-10-7 record, a 2.58 goals against, a .915 save percentage, and 2 shutouts. He has 1 year left on his deal at $5 million. But Ross, every time I start getting nervous about Ullmark, or I'm like, is he going to be able to handle the workload, or how's he going to play behind the Sens defense as opposed to Boston? I am hit with relief when I go look over at what's happening in Boston, and Joonas Korpisalo is doing Joonas Korpisalo things. That goal he allowed on Quentin Byfield was classic Korpisalo, and it makes me comforted being like, okay, it wasn't just the Sens weren't the issue with Korpisalo, so maybe the Sens won't be an issue at all with Linus Ullmark.
So when your ex fails in life afterwards, is what you're saying?
Yeah, or maybe not fails, but just continues the toxic patterns that were the reason why you couldn't stay with them.
Yeah, and especially when your new partner is Linus Ullmark. The guy's name's on the Vezina Trophy just 2 years ago. If you do the last 2 years combined, he is number 1 in almost every goaltending category. His goals saved above expected is sparkling. Even just a .915 save percentage this year guarantees the Ottawa Senators a playoff spot.
Guarantees?
If Linus Ullmark has a .915 save percentage and plays 50 games or more, the Senators will make the playoffs. with that number, they might even be top 3.
Yeah, they might have made the playoffs last year with that number. Like that's like a 0.2 upgrade. Like that's a massive upgrade on the goaltending last year. I have the utmost confidence in Linus Ullmark. I mean, he shined in the game up against Montreal, had a couple really big saves that Corpy wouldn't have made.
And late saves, right? Key saves where your team just has so much confidence that they can make a mistake every once in a while. And they know that they've got this guy to back them up.
Ross, I'll one up your late saves points. Early saves as well. I mean, that first glove save where it was kind of the puck was up in the air and he snagged it. That was early in the game, and you need the early saves so that you can get to a point where the late saves matter, Ross.
Yes, that's just it. 2 shutouts last season as well. He's going into the final year of his contract, making $5 million per season. Of course, the Senators trying to play it cool, right? You're just on your first date.
We're chill.
You're not shopping for wedding rings on. Yeah. Hey, you're not shopping for wedding rings on your second date.
Let's just have fun, see how it goes, see if we like each other, and we'll go from there.
But I'm in lust for sure.
Sure.
I just think that he's the best goalie the Sens have had since Craig Anderson, and it's not even close. It's not even close.
No, it's not. It's not even close.
I hope this doesn't age poorly.
When has that happened to us, Ross?
Not on our show, never. But look, what else is there to say about him?
I think another thing I want to say is that the personality just shines as well. Like, this guy seems like an awesome dude. But as you heard from Claire Hanna in our interview, it's not like all the other Sens goalies didn't fit in with the team in a social aspect. But I don't know. Ross, if you're asking me, a Swedish goalie that wants to be a number 1 and has a young family, like, signing a long-term deal in Ottawa is a match made in heaven, in my opinion. So I'm really not at all nervous that something's going to get done here. I feel good about it.
All right. Well, coming in at number 4 on our organizational value rankings, it's the debut for Linus Ullmark. So to recap today, Drake Batherson at number 6, Claude Giroux at 5, and Linus Ullmark at number 4. Tomorrow, bonus episode. The top 3, I was about to name them, but I didn't want to give any order, so you'll have to wait and see for that. All right, Pillsy, now we should get to the meat on the bone. There's a ton of it today because, look, I'm very much on the Tim Stützle side of things. I think that the elite talent is something that the Ottawa Senators, you could already argue, in terms of pure raw talent, Tim Stützle might be already top 5 in Sens history. In terms of the highlight reel moves and just the overall skill, it'd be like Spezza, Carlson. Like, I'm already starting to slow down. Hossa Havlat. Like, Alfie was smart, hard work, dedication, and like he had great talent, but I don't think like Tim Stützle's natural ability, right? Alfie's a 6th-round pick. He played the game like a 4th-line grinder. He just had that extra touch around the net and could tickle the twine on his slap shot on the power play. I don't think that's disrespectful to Alfie at all. I just think I think Havlat, in terms of like naturally gifted, like they fly out there. You know what I mean? I just think maybe dynamic would be the word, because Alfie was cerebral. He was a thinker out there, more like Claude Giroux, whereas like Timmy can turn the game on his head just in the moment's notice with his speed and his dynamic ability. But then Jake Sanderson is Mr. Perfect. The guy took 9 minor penalties in over 1,000 minutes last year. He's elite at both ends of the ice, and now he's a double-digit goal scorer. So how did you handicap whether or not it was going to be Timmy or Jake Sanderson at number 2 or Brady Tkachuk? But I don't think it's any secret the way that he's the leader, the captain. Oh, yeah, and he's just recently been on Locked On Senators, that he's going to stay at number 1. No spoilers.
Yeah. So the question is, who's number 2 between Jake Sanderson and Tim Stützle? You asked, how did I differentiate between the two and what gave the edge to a certain player? And for me, Ross, that's consistency. Tim Stützle's highest highs are more impressive than Jake Sanderson's, but Tim Stützle's lowest lows are much more lower than Jake Sanderson, whereas Jake Sanderson is consistently a great defenseman. Is he going to show up on the TSN top 10 highlight reel? Probably not. But go talk to anyone in the hockey world that is really paying attention, especially talk to defensemen, former defensemen, current defensemen, coaches that coach on the defensive side of the game. And Jake Sanderson is one of the top guys in the league. And when you look at a guy that skates as well as Jake Sanderson, he's got that Niedermayer-esque ability to him, doesn't break a sweat. Like, for me, Ross, it was the fact that with Jake Sanderson, night in and night out, you're going to get a nice, smooth performance, and he's a number one defenseman. Whereas Tim Stützle, one night, you might get what was the word you used? Dynamism. You might get that one night.
You want a definition of it?
Hit me.
The quality of being characterized by vigorous activity and progress.
Okay. But like Tim Stützle can show those superstar flashes of skill, and then another night he's trying to do too much. He's turning the puck over at the neutral zone when he's trying to deke through 4 different guys, or he's doing a spinorama in his own zone around no one and loses the puck. And it's like, Timmy, what are we doing here? But that's the thing, Ross, is with having a number one defenseman that's going to be consistent like Jake Sanderson, for me, is more valuable than the number one centerman that one night might be your best player and another night might be a liability.
In terms of the franchise history, though, what Tim Stützle did, not this past season, but the year before, is outrageous. The 6th most points in a single season by a Senator ever. Yeah. And he did it at 21 years old. The only ones higher. Heatley had 105 in 06-07. Alfie had 103 in 05-06. Heatley had 103 in 05-06. Alexei Yashin had 94 in 98-99. And Spezza had 92 in 07-08. Like, those are the only players in franchise history. I just named four captains and Danny Heatley.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
And don't get it twisted. This is not me putting Tim Stützle down. I'm a Tim Stützle guy. I'm the Umlaut creator. I love Tim Stützle. However, it's more me raising awareness, a public service announcement, raising awareness that Jake Sanderson is it's just such a breath of relief to know you have a number one defenseman that's going to play great night in and night out.
So we always say on this show, we're a show for fans,
by fans.
So when we disagree, we put it to a poll on Twitter at Sens Central, and Jake Sanderson's slight edge, and it was going to be a close poll. It always was going to. You can still have your say at Sens Central. A lot of great replies. One person posted the meme. I don't know if it's from The Wire or what, but where he's like raising the gun like he has to shoot his friend. And he's like crying at the same time. It's like, this is how I feel about you making me choose between these two guys. Yeah, but Jake Sanderson gets 56% of the initial votes, 450. So a good sample size so far. And I think we just have to get into Tim Stützle then. Coming in at number 3 on our organizational value rankings, it's Timmy Superstar. I almost feel bad that he's at number 3, but you certainly can't overlook the fact that he had 1 power play goal last year, 18 total goals, and that chilly plus minus the 17 under is standing out like a sore thumb, albeit not the be all end all. There's certainly other elements of your game that you look at. And I think that we could see a revenge season. And I think he could be right in the mix at number 2 or even number 1 next year.
Yeah, and I'm not discrediting that. That's for sure. I'm not putting down Tim Stützle's talent, his skill, his ability. Not at all. I believe in this kid. It's going to take time, right? Like, this is the kind of thing where he's had a lot of responsibility put on him. Recently, the number 1 centerman of this team, and it's not going to be easy. There's going to be highs and lows, and he was dealing with that wrist injury last season. We all know that now. We understand that. I don't want to say it's an excuse for the performance, but it's more of a reason why.
Makes sense when you drop 21 goals.
Exactly. Like, if he can't shoot the puck confidently, you're going to have a hard time scoring goals in the National Hockey League. That's just how it goes. I fully believe that Tim Stützle is going to be a consistent 30 goal scorer in the NHL. It would shock me if he doesn't get back to 30 goals this season, especially Ross, if they keep that line in stone. Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, and Claude Giroux. Oh my God, that's a great top line. So yeah, did we already read the stats?
I'll hit you with he's 6 foot tall, 190 pounds. He's still just 22 years old. Think about that for a second. He's 22 years old. And if you look at the career leaders in Ottawa Senators, he's climbing up some lists like rather quickly. So we're looking forward to another season and then 6 more after that on his current contract. He's got 7 years left at $8.35 million. We mentioned the 18 goals. He did, though, have 70 points in 75 games. Why don't you let the people know where he's been over the last 5 organizational value rankings?
So the 3rd overall pick in the 2020 draft started out number 3 in our OVR, then number 2 again, number 2 again, and now he's back at number 3. So, I mean, like that's just the thing, Ross. Like we're debating this, but like we're debating whether he's going to be the 2nd best player on this team or the 3rd best. Like there's no room. Tier. This is the tier. Like these, well, I was about to say these 3 are going to be 1, 2, and 3 for the remainder of their career, but there is a certain player that might sneak in there at one point. But for the foreseeable future,
are you trying to make me yak right now?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. Or like, I don't even, maybe Linus? That's pushing it. I was going to say, I don't even think it's that crazy that Linus could get in the mix in this tier as well.
Hey, put your name on the Vezina again this year. We'll talk.
Yeah. But he's an elite talent, and I think he's only going to get better. Like you mentioned, Ross, 22 years old. I think a lot of the time we put a lot of pressure on Timmy, but he's not like, he's entering his prime stage, right? Like I feel like for a centerman, your prime is probably going to be 24 to 28. Is that fair to say?
Unless you're Giroux, then it's still 36.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So this kid's got a long way to go, and for him to be where he is already is amazing.
Tim Stützle, 7th all-time in Sens history in points per game, behind names like Claude Giroux, Matt Duchene, Daniel Alfredson, Alexei Yashin, Jason Spezza, and Danny Heatley. Tim Stützle, a long career ahead, and we need to see this guy in the playoffs. Just he should almost be a member of the Rat Pack too, by the way. The way he gets under team's skin, that smile. Look at the photo. Like, if you're another team, I think he might be the most hated player on the Ottawa Senators around the league. And this team has a lot of guys. Just ask Kevin Bex about Nick Cousins, who maybe aren't that well liked. And like he just has this natural ability to get under people's skin. I love it. I think he's a great talent, and he comes in at number 3 on our organizational value rankings. All right, now to our organizational value rankings. Number 2, it's Jake Sanderson. No surprise there, Pilsy. Why were you banging the table that this guy is number 2?
He's number 2 on the list, Ross, but he's a number 1 defenseman. And the Ottawa Senators haven't really had a true bona fide number 1 defenseman since Erik Karlsson left. I mean, that's not meant to disrespect Thomas Chabot, but...
Or Ron Hainsey.
Johnny
Oduya.
But the
Erica Branson, Kevin.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, how long do you want to go? This is gonna be a long episode if you want to name all the random defensemen that have been here since. But
Dion Phaneuf.
We don't need to mention those guys anymore, Ross, because we got Jake Sanderson, an elite number 1 defenseman, only 22 years old. In 79 games last season, he had 10 goals, double digits. How are you? 28 assists, good for 38 points, plus 8 and only 23 penalty minutes. When they paired Jake Sanderson with Artem Zub, they created a legit number 1 shutdown D pairing that can stop some of the best offenses in the league. But while having a shutdown pair like that, a player like Jake Sanderson, I would call a 2-way defenseman. He's so silky and smooth. Sure, he's not going to be doing the dangles that Karlsson or Carter Yakimchuk gets away with, but he's transitioning that puck up the ice with some of the best in the league. And when you have a guy that can do that, he doesn't need to be the offensive flair because he's going to be setting up the Tim Stützles, the Brady Tkachuks, the Drake Bathersons, the Claude Giroux, the Josh Norrises. He's going to be setting those guys up, and that's what keeps the offense humming at a high rate. So Ross, for me, a lot of what I give credit for Jake Sanderson is is his skating. Because if you're going to succeed in this league as a young defenseman, you need to be able to skate. And Jake Sanderson's skating ability is amazing. I could watch this guy go and skate, no sticks, no puck, just have him out there skating. I would watch it.
I don't blame you for that either. He is just an electric talent, and it's all through his skating. Like Tim Stützle said in that mic'd up video last season, buddy, you're the fastest guy alive, and he knows it. He uses his speed. My favorite is when he takes the puck and rags it behind the net, and all of a sudden, boom, he decides which way he goes, and all of a sudden you blink and he's at the blue line already. He's a one-man zone exit, one-man zone entry, and he's so elite in transition, which is where the NHL is going further and further into. You have to be able to transport the puck with speed and be able to make plays. And he's so smart, so cerebral, but he does everything at full speed. He walks the line at full speed, and we know he's been working on his shot a ton over the last couple of years, and you see the jump from just 4 goals, more than doubling it, up to 10.
Yep.
You look at 156 games into his NHL career. By the end of this season, he's probably going to be 10th in Senators history in points by a defenseman.
Really?
Think about that for a second. He needs 28 points this season to pass Norm McIver for 10th all time.
I think that'll happen.
That's the type of talent that we're watching. He's going into his 3rd season.
Wow.
Incredible player, and there's a reason why he's at number 2. He's 6'2", 285 pounds, left shot defenseman. He started at number 4, was number 4 in 2021. I don't know if it was the injury that he suffered. He missed half of the season in 2022. That's a mea culpa on our part. He was number 7 in 2022. And then we fixed that real quick ahead of his rookie season and had him at number 3. And then this year at number 2. I should say after his rookie season, he was number 3 and then number 2 this year. 10 goals, 38 points in 79 games, a +8, the best for any defenseman on the Senators team. And those 23 PIMs include a fight against Matthew Tkachuk. Yep. So really 9 minor penalties for Jake Sanderson. Just a treat to watch.
Yeah, and he's only going to get better. Like that's the crazy thing. Like I think Ross,
I got a spicy over under for you.
Okay, hit me.
15 goals.
Yeah, I think he hits it. I thought you were about to say 50 points because that's where I was going, Ross. I think he can consistently be a 50-point guy. Now, some people might say, well, you look at the Cale Makars, the Quinn Hughes, they're getting way more than 50 points. That's fine. But Jake Sanderson is an elite two-way guy. Like his ability to defend and then chip in offensively like this is so clutch for this team to have a guy that they can pivot both ways like that. And he's going to be the guy in the number 1 power play. Thomas Chabot is now going to be the quarterback of the 2nd power play unit. And I think that's the right move because Jake Sanderson is going to set up all those talented players, just like I mentioned.
So if I set the over under at 15.5, I'm going to take the over on that. Last year, only 7 defensemen had more than 15 goals.
It's tough to score more than 15, Ross. I think 15 is a good over under.
Why don't we just say 20?
No, I don't think Jake Sanderson can score 20 goals.
4 defensemen did. Dahlin, Weegar, Makar, and Josi. That's it.
Weegar got 20. Wow.
20 goals, 32 assists. Yeah, he's a stud.
Damn.
And then Bouchard had 18, Adam Fox and Quinn Hughes had 17. Those are basically the Norris candidates in that mix.
Honestly, yeah. I think 15 is a good number to shoot for.
Okay, well, let's see what Jake Sanderson has in store for his 3rd season in the league, the first year of his 8-year, $8.05 million extension. Say what you will about Pierre Dorion's time in Ottawa. Locking Jake Sanderson up when he did for how much he did is outrageous. This will be the best contract in the National Hockey League, I believe, for the next years to come. Maybe not as soon as this year. It's just starting. But as the cap goes up and he's in like year 3, and we're like, he's got 5 years left at $8 million, when all the other defensemen in this tier and in this category in their prime are making 10 plus.
Yep.
It's going to be pretty clear how well valued Jake Sanderson is at number 2 on our organizational value rankings.
And just quickly to finish off on that note, what I've been trying to get people on is don't look at the salary cap hit. We got to be paying attention to the percentages because that's
making me do more math.
Yeah, I'm the substitute math teacher here, Ross. Pop quiz. But that's what's going to be important, because it's like inflation, right? Like 8 million now is going to be a different worth than 8 million in a couple of years. Like the percentage of what 8 million actually is going to go down and down and down and down. And that's going to provide so much value.
All right, Pilsy, we asked on Twitter at Sens Central, is Brady Tkachuk the most valuable player on the Sens? 80.5% agree that he is. So therefore, coming in at number one, it's Brady Tkachuk, 25-year-old left winger, 6'4", 212 pounds. It's his third consecutive season at number one on our organizational value rankings. And when he was at number 3 in 2021, the caveat was he didn't have a contract. So that put him down. And in 2020, he made his debut on this list at number 2. Why is Brady Tkachuk the most valuable player in the organization?
Well, first off, Ross, it's good to know the Sens Central citizens know puck. You love to see that, getting both of the polls correct, in my opinion. But why is he number one? Great question, Ross Levitan. So he is number one because, first off, he's wearing the C. That helps. He's a leader among men. He's leading this franchise. He's someone that is a modern day power forward among one of the best of them, that can hit, get shots, can be a playmaker, scores goals, can fight, can lead a team. He comes from a hockey background, obviously the Tkachuk family, Matthew and Big Walt. Like, if you were building a hockey player in a lab, you would probably build something like Brady Tkachuk, unless you're a Montreal Canadiens fan and you're hoping to get a Jesper Kotkaniemi type instead. Like, that is the type of player you want here. 6'4", 212 pounds, recently a father. He's got that new dad strength. Like, Brady Tkachuk is going to be unstoppable this year, Ross. And I don't love talking about it, but it's not nothing, so it's worth being mentioned. I think Matthew Tkachuk winning the Stanley Cup last year is a huge boost to what Brady Tkachuk will do this year, because he just saw his brother win it all after his brother's been in the playoffs, pretty much every single season. And Brady hasn't even sniffed. He hasn't even been close to being in the playoffs. So I think you get the new dad strength, you get that jealous little brother syndrome, and you get new owner, new management, new coach. Like, everything is aligning. The stars are aligning for Brady Tkachuk to blow the doors down and lead this team to the promised land, the playoffs.
So talented, so emotional on the ice, for better or worse. I think that's something Sens fans would like to see less of, where he's, getting in the mix after losing the game, where it's kind of like, you get a little bit of that little brother energy where it's like, you just lost, now I'm going to throw a bit of a tantrum. But I think he has gotten better at that over the course of the year. And I'd rather have to rein in my captain than 100%. Push him to go, than, rather than have to get him up for games. This guy's an absolute gamer. And if you ask anybody across the National Hockey League, which player that we haven't seen in the playoffs would you most think would thrive? Brady Tkachuk is basically the unanimous answer. I think Rasmus Dahlin would be up there too. He'd be a fun playoff guy, but not even close to Brady Tkachuk, who we said would go number one in a 2018 redraft. Of course he would. Now, when you look at what he brings, he makes his teammates better. That's one thing about his game I think is underappreciated. His playmaking is unbelievable. This guy can dish the puck, and I think he's still scratching the surface, right? He's in the prime of his career now, 25 years old, dad strength, jealous brother. I can't wait to see what Brady Tkachuk has in store this season.
And Ross, there's so much that he does that doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Like, there's probably so many phantom assists that he really should be unofficially credited for when he's in front of the net. Like, the chaos he's causing. We mentioned his dimensions, 6'4", 212. Like, goalies are having a hard time seeing around this guy. And I think a lot of people around the league kind of give him a hard time. Well, yeah, he gets a lot of shots on goal, but they're just useless jam plays where he's just jamming there. But he's creating chaos. He's creating rebounds. And if you're a defenseman or a goalie and Brady Tkachuk is in front of the net right by the crease, you have to pay attention to him. And that causes a lot of open ice for teammates to get the puck and use the puck if it's in that area. So I just, like, we could go on and on and on about great things. And Great guy. Joined the Locked On Senators podcast. One of our best interviews ever. If you haven't watched that yet, you're crazy, but go check it out now. Brady Tkachuk's the man. Like we could have just done that, Ross. Brady Tkachuk, number one. He's the man. Thank you very much. Roll the credits.
Do you want to feel old?
No.
Oh, okay. Then I won't bring up my stat then.
Well, you're older than me, actually, so sure.
Brady Tkachuk is 7th all-time in goals by an Ottawa Senator.
I can't decide if that's awesome or not.
He's 18 goals behind Danny Heatley.
Ooh, well, yeah, wow.
So how many goals do you think Brady Tkachuk's going to get this year? Is 30 fair?
No, 30 is definitely fair. Yep.
He will be 4th all-time in Sens history in goals if he gets 30 this year. He's 28 behind Marian Hossa for number 4.
Wow.
Like, he is climbing up the ranks. He's 9th all-time in points. And let's say he gets another 70. Let's be conservative. He had 74 last year. Let's say he gets 70 this year. Sure. He's going to be 5th all-time in points.
What if he gets 30 goals for 4 more years? So add 120 goals to his total. Where does that put him?
120 goals. He would be at 282. He'd be 2nd behind Alfie.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've decided that's awesome, actually.
Yeah, well, it is. Yep, you're right. And he's 100 points away from being 5th all-time in points as well. Like, we are watching a franchise legend grow right in front of our eyes, and I just hope he's a Senator for life. And for that to happen, the team has to have success.
Yep.
It just change is inevitable in the hockey world, and when teams fail, more change comes. I think he wants to be in Ottawa. I don't think he has that same itch as his brother to get out of Canada or get out into a war market, all that. I think he wants to have a legacy, and he has the opportunity to go down as one of the greatest Ottawa Senators of all time. And I think that should be the carrot along with the Stanley Cup that Brady Tkachuk should be focused on in his final 4 years of this contract, and hopefully many more years after that. I'm spin zoning it. The fact they got him to lock up 7 years under the previous ownership, I really think that by the time he's due for a next contract, things are going to be so player-friendly in Ottawa that I think he'd be crazy to leave as long as they have success on the ice.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And I think the difference too, Ross, is Matthew Tkachuk, I feel like he wanted to go somewhere where he could make more of a statement and didn't have to deal with as much unfair criticism. Like, I feel like in Calgary, there's a lot of unfair criticism towards him. And he knew if he went to Florida, he wouldn't have to deal with that. And you could see the makings of a good team there in Florida. They just needed someone that could bring what Matthew Tkachuk brings. Whereas Brady Tkachuk is the guy here. Like there's nothing in his way in Ottawa. And I think he's the perfect player, the perfect fit. And we need to see this guy in the playoffs.
We certainly do. Brady Tkachuk comes in at number 1 on our organizational value rankings. If you have any qualms or concerns or comments, or if you want to give us a pat on the back, you can do that in the comments